Chapter 341. The light green mangrove elf was indeed picked up by a Chi on Mangrove Island. When a Chi was playing on Mangrove Island, she found this little girl. It was so small and cute, just like Ella. But it was very timid. I threw the fruit to it to eat, and it hesitated for a long time before picking it up. Then it gradually approached me and bit my finger. A Chi described her experience with the mangrove elf in detail. At that time, a Chi suddenly found herself establishing a contract with the little girl, and she could understand what it was thinking. "Brother, is this a contract between humans and elves? So sirens can also contract with elves? You contracted it?" List was surprised. This was the elf rewarded to him by the smoke mission, but it unexpectedly contracted with the siren a Chi. Although a Chi was also his personal possession, it was not a personal contract, which was a little uncomfortable. But soon he put away his selfishness, nodded, and said gently, "Basically, elves only contract with humans, but it doesn't mean that elves can't contract with other creatures. After all, this is not a magic contract invented by humans. So it is not surprising that sirens can contract elves." "Is that so?" A Chi tilted her head. "But I don't know how to take care of the elf." "Brother, why don't a Chi cancel the contract with the little girl and you contract it? Its worm stalk is a mangrove tree, right in the middle of Mangrove Island, and the surrounding trees bear many small fruits, which are delicious." List was tempted. List immediately rejected it. "Since it took the initiative to contract with you, it is destined to be with you. I don't need to waste its contract times. Yours and mine are the same. Did you bring the fruit of the mangrove tree?" "I brought some." She waved her hand, and the seawater in the shell immediately held a handful of light yellow fruit and placed it in List's hand. The fruit had no magic power. It was just an ordinary fruit, crooked in shape, and the size was about the size of a thumbnail. List pinched one into his mouth and chewed it twice. It was a little sweet and sour, and it tasted delicious. It could probably be treated as a fruit. This may be the greatest value of the mangrove elf at present. He could only hope to encounter the magic medicine mangrove in the future, or mutate a more valuable species of mangrove. "A Chi, did you name it?" List asked as he looked at the elf who had poked its head out of a Chi's hair and was looking at him curiously. Unlike Ella's rough and careless image, it looked more delicate, and its color was crystal clear like jade. There were 2 small green leaves and a small red flower on the top of his head. Her big eyes blinked, appearing extremely pure. It made a sound like a little girl talking to herself, "Gee goo." No wonder Chi called it a little girl. "Brother, I've been thinking for a long time, but I still can't think of a name for it." "Why don't you give it a name? Let me." List didn't refuse. After thinking for a while, he had an idea. "Let's call it Nami." "Nami?" "Yes, this name represents the summoning of the tides." "Nami. Well, let's call it Nami. It's a nice name." A Chi pulled the mangrove elf out of her hair and placed her on her palm. "Little girl, your name is Nami from now on. Do you understand?" The little elf called out timidly, "Gee goo." She accepted her new name, Nami. "A Chi, since Nami is already your contracted elf, you should take good care of it. I will give you a jade box and some jade powder to feed it. Then every time you go to the mangrove forest, pay attention to the attributes of the mangrove worm fungus and figure out the role of those mangroves." The siren nodded. "A Chi understands. Nami will definitely help brother and play the role of an elf." She had read a lot of books and knew the value of elves to humans. "Wait here for a while. I'll bring Ella over and let it meet Nami." "Okay." After a while, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. List had brought Ella over. After seeing a Chi, Ella was very happy and repeatedly cried, "Wow, wow." It hadn't seen the siren for several days. At this time, from a Chi's hair, Nami poked her head again. Suddenly, the two elves met for the first time. Ella was stunned. It flapped its wings and stared at Nami in a daze. No one knew what it was thinking. It was not the first time it had seen its kind. It had seen it in Tulip Castle. Nami was seeing its kind for the first time. She stood on Achi's shoulder and waved her hand, looking at Ella. She greeted softly, "Ji Gu." 10 seconds later, Ella reacted and flew over to Nami. List watched the interaction of the two little guys with a smile on his face. He felt that such a picture was really beautiful. However, the next moment, his smile stopped abruptly. He saw Ella fly to Nami, raise her little hand, and directly slap Nami's head. Wow! Her emotions were strong. List immediately sensed that she was telling Nami to get out. Nami was directly slapped by this slap and fell from Achi's shoulder. Fortunately, Achi reacted in time and separated a water belt to catch Nami. Falling on the hose, Nami bursts into tears. "Ella!" List hurriedly shouted, "Stop it!" After listening, Ella put her hands on her waist and swaggered in the air. She shouted, "Wow!" to List and, "Wow!" to Achi, as if to show how powerful she was. When she saw List, she glared. She flattened her mouth and flew back to his shoulder, not daring to make trouble. On the other side, Achi had already held Nami and comforted her softly, "Don't cry, Nami. Ella didn't mean it. It's usually very cute. I believe you will become good friends." This was not a happy meeting. After Achi's comfort, Nami no longer cried, but hid in her hair and never showed her head again. Compared to Ella's boldness, she was really timid. Take care of Nami, List didn't know what to say, so he simply took Ella back. Along the way, Ella was naturally scolded and punished. She was not allowed to leave the worm room for 3 days. If she hits another elf next time, the punishment will be doubled. In the face of such punishment, Ella looked dispirited all the way. She was too active, and confinement was a nightmare for her. Moreover, there was no warm shell to bathe in the worm room. When he returned to the castle, the town's administrative officer, Isaiah, just arrived. "Sir, what can I do for you?" Ella was handed over to Butler Carter to be sent to the worm room. List said, "I intend to expand 500 acres of corn grass. See if there are any wastelands that can be cultivated and immediately arrange serfs to cultivate them. Now it is past the spring plowing season, and the cultivation should be completed as soon as possible. We already have 280 acres of corn grass. According to the arrangement at the beginning of the year, it is enough for Flower Town to use. Why do we still need to cultivate 500 acres? Because I intend to expand the scale of cattle and horses." "As you wish." Isaiah took the order and left. Mrs. Morrison brewed milk tea and Carter brought it to List. Picking up the teacup and taking a sip of fragrant milk tea, List's mixed emotions were well calmed. Anyway, the territory's second elf has been obtained. Chapter 342. Just like Achi, List didn't want to expose Nami at this moment. Although the true benefits of the smoke mission were not known, the exposed parts were already scary enough. If he continued to expose himself, it would be beyond the scope of the knight's glorious blessing. List was a cautious person and would continue to keep a low profile. For example, now, hiding in the castle's flower bed, he quietly watered 20 pots of snake blood fruit with the blood of the 6-headed sea snake king. When most of the snake blood was used up, 4 of the pots of snake blood fruit had a magical reaction and successfully bred snake blood fruit sprite worms. Another 4 sprite worms. I feel that this year will be a bumper harvest. List stopped watering the snake blood fruit potted with snake blood. In the future, he only needed to fertilize the sprite worms and provide them with sufficient nutrition. There was no need to waste the snake blood. The snake blood was mainly concentrated on watering the remaining 16 pots of snake blood fruit. However, after 2 days of continuous watering, the remaining snake blood fruit pots still had no reaction. Another day of watering, and still no reaction. It seems that the snake blood fruits that should have produced sprite worms should have been produced long ago. As for those that cannot be produced, there is no point in continuing. Liszt took measures to promptly cut off the losses, decisively intercepting the remaining quarter of the snake blood. He stored it and waited for the next use. In his mind, perhaps a few years later, the snake blood sprite worms would begin to evolve, and the snake blood would come in handy to help them transform again. However, he suddenly thought, a few years later, he might be riding a dragon. It would be easy to hunt a sea snake monster. Why should he keep the snake blood and waste the area of the gem space? So, he decided to divide the snake blood into two, one to continue watering one pot of snake blood fruit to see if it could produce new sprite worms, and the other to eat. Mid-level sea monster snake blood was a great tonic, and the effect was remarkable. Recently, he had found the safest way to take the least amount of medicine and get the greatest effect. Coupled with the meat of the mid-level sea monster, his total chi rose steadily, breaking through almost every day. Compared to when I killed the six-headed sea snake king, my total chi has increased by 2/3. Speaking of which, I can now fight 4 Marcus at once, right? Marcus had already become the standard unit of measurement for his strength. Could it be shortened to the strength of 4 horses? This method of calculation was very unscientific, but there was really no better reference. On the Coral Island, there were not many elite Earth Knights that could fight against Liszt. The 2 Viscounts Yunus and Trick should be a bit stronger than Liszt. After all, they were the veteran representatives of the Poison Stream. In addition, there was the elite knight squad under the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry. Among them, there were a few knights that were half drug addicts and half combat skill users. They could fight evenly with Liszt. After that, his brother, Levis, and Brandon Gravel, the heir of Gravel Castle, also took drugs, but their strength was definitely not as good as Liszt's. Not every elite Earth Knight of the Potion Stream could afford to spend the money on potions. As for those who could afford the potions, like Levis and Brandon, they had not grasped the scientific method of taking potions, nor did they have dragon milk or mid-level sea monster meat to supplement themselves. Later, I will find an opportunity to spar with the elites of the Orders of Chivalry and test my fighting strength. Under the apple tree, on the rocking chair. Liszt cancelled magic eyes. The apple tree in front of him had already given birth to a sprite worm, which was among the flowers on the branches above the apple table. This convinced Liszt that the birth of the apple sprite worm was likely due to his influence on it at all times. Magic power, matter, spirit. It's probably the triangular theory studied by wizards. He did not understand much about it, nor did he want to understand it. He only needed to understand that he already had 17 sprite worms, 1 peanut sprite worm, 1 alfalfa sprite worm, 1 tulip sprite worm, 1 corn sprite worm, 1 wheat sprite worm, 1 tomato sprite worm, 1 fragrant coconut sprite worm, 1 black nightshade sprite worm, 1 corn grass sprite worm, 3 rubber sprite worms, 4 snake blood fruit sprite worms, and 1 apple sprite worm. In the beginning, he only had 4 sprite worms. 1 year later, he had 2 lesser sprites, 17 sprite worms, and 9 mid-level World of Warcraft worms. He was very satisfied with this harvest. Even Tulip Castle, from the Viscount era until now, had only accumulated 1 greater sprite, 12 lesser sprites, and 100 sprite worms. With 1 town and 1 year's worth of time, what was there to be dissatisfied with? He exercised his wrists, got up, and said, "Philip, give me the bow and arrows." "Yes, sir." The retainer knight Philip will immediately handed over the bow and arrows. Liszt stood under the apple tree, aiming at the distant target and began to practice multiple arrows. Now, he was not only a powerful elite great knight, but also a brilliant sharpshooter. He understood the principle of hard work makes waste. In order to increase his strength, he practiced fighting skills and archery every day, turning them into his instincts. Just like that, April passed by with continuous harvests. The weather was getting hotter and hotter, and the spring seedlings sprouted quickly. When May arrived, the serfs had already replanted 500 mu of corn grass, and the smoke mission was quickly completed. Mission completed. Reward, 4 dragon cows. Meanwhile, the good news of the dairy farm quickly spread to the castle. Big Yellow, one of the 3 cows, was the first to give birth to a healthy calf. It was a female calf and could produce milk. List circled around the calf, looking at it left and right, feeling very excited. On the 3rd day, Big Black also began to give birth. It was a bit difficult to give birth to twins in its belly. It took half a day for the birth to be successfully completed, giving birth to a male and a female calf. Then the next week, Big Flower, who had not moved for a long time, gave birth to the 4th dragon cow, a female calf. List personally named the 4 dragon cows, 3 female calves, Young Flower, Young Black, and Young Yellow, and the male calf, Strong Strong. Inheriting the historical tradition of the dairy farm, the 5 stages of young, milk, small, big, old, strong, and strong corresponded to 5 different names, which was very eye-catching. He also instructed the serfs of the dairy farm. From now on, the dairy farm's cows are divided into 3 levels. The first level is the best, which are these 4 calves. You have to feed them with the best feed and the most meticulous care. The second level is the original 9 cows, which also have to be carefully taken care of. The lowest level is the newly purchased cows, which have to be treated normally. Yes, Sir Lord, your instructions are the goal of our work. The old steward of the dairy farm was very thin. He wanted to flatter List, but he was not good at it. He was very good at delivering calves, and all 4 calves were delivered by him. For this, List rewarded him with 4 silver coins in recognition of his contribution in delivering calves. 1 silver coin for each successful calf. So for the past week, he had been very happy. When leaving the dairy farm, List could already see the future pastures of dragon cows. At that time, all the milk in his diet would be replaced by dragon milk. Nutritious. Chapter 343. Taking potions, practicing fighting skills, practicing archery, practicing actual combat with Paris, training dogs, playing the piano, patrolling the territory, communicating with the sirens, teasing the mangrove sprite Nami, replying to the island's aristocrats and declining the invitation to the banquet, holding a dinner party, listening to flattery, consuming a lot of food, and watching Ella make trouble at the banquet. Riding a horse, traveling by boat, traveling between Flower Town and Black Horse Island. Life in May was basically such a smooth start, but List did not feel monotonous. Although there was no TV, computer, or mobile phone, life here was full every day. From morning to night, as long as he wanted to do something, there would be a lot of things waiting for him. Just like now. Hiding in the castle's flower garden, watering a single pot of snake blood fruit with the snake blood of a mid-level sea monster. After more than a week, there was still no magic feedback. It turned out that the first few times of cultivating snake blood, if it could not successfully breed a sprite worm, it would be useless in the future. He decided not to waste the snake blood anymore and focused on the smoke mission. After getting the dragon cow reward, the smoke mission began to be updated. However, this was not a simple mission, and it was quite difficult to complete. Mission: as an elite Earth Knight, with a mid-level World of Warcraft pet, and can even hunt mid-level sea monsters, except for the lack of followers, there is nothing that can stop you from going to the battlefield to gain merit. Please form a Earth Knight squad. Reward: a new variety of black nightshade. The reward was a new variety of black nightshade. This made List very excited. It was very likely that the reward would be the black nightshade magic potion. Now was the peak of his potions. Relying on flame mushrooms, fast-growing magic thorns, intercepted black tulip, and temporarily planted snow flame mushrooms in winter, he could barely meet his potion needs. But when there was a new magic potion, he would never complain too much. Therefore, it was necessary to form a night squad. And it had to be done as soon as possible. He didn't want to delay the new smoke mission. Now there are 6 members, and we need to recruit 6 more members to form a 12-member night squad. As for me, I am certainly not counted in the night squad. List knew very well that he, who had Dosen, was not suited to charge with the night. He was more suited to command from behind the scenes. He picked up the crystal teacup on the table, blew the tea leaves on the surface of the water, and took a sip leisurely. This was the new tea that had just been picked this month. The 3 green tea trees were much more productive than expected. After fertilizing them, they could pick new tea 2 or 3 times a month. This allowed List to drink more tea, digest the grease, and eat more World of Warcraft meat. In terms of luxury, he has definitely far surpassed Levis, who is backed by Tulip Castle. Levis at most eats the World of Warcraft fire rabbit meat raised by Tulip Castle every day, but he eats mid-level sea monsters. The Count, who has returned from a meeting in Blue Dragon Island and successfully made a name for himself with flower brew, wrote a letter of envy. The Count hoped to taste the snake stew. After thinking about it, List reluctantly cut off 5.5 kilograms of snake meat and sent it to the Tulip Castle. This 5 pounds of snake meat is probably enough for a meal at the Tulip Castle dinner. He put away his thoughts that always tended to wander off. He continued to pay attention to the formation of the night squad. At present, among his followers, there are already 6 Earth Knights. 2 elite Earth Knights, the Wind attribute Marcus Wheel, the Thunder attribute Charles Trapp, 4 ordinary Earth Knights, the Earth attribute Rondo Kettle, Rick Footprint, the Fire attribute Russell Steele, and the Thunder attribute Griffin Haystack. At present, there are 10 Earth Knights in collusion with Flower Town. I should select 6 outstanding ones from them as soon as possible. After List killed the snake, he became even more famous, and naturally, more Knight wanted to seek refuge with him. However, not everyone sought refuge with him. Morality, character, age, and identity were all criteria to be carefully measured. Putting down the teacup, List glanced around the apple table and asked, Consultant Gort, Teacher Marcus, Charles, Zambrata, which 6 of these 10 Earth Knights do you think should be recruited to form a night squad? Gort and Marcus were his teachers and most trusted people. Charles was a veteran elite Earth Knight, and his marginal identity allowed him to provide better ideas. Zambrata was an aristocrat who had been deprived of his title, but he also had his own vision. List called them over to give him advice. Gort shook his wooden cup. The leaves of the green tea tree are indeed magical leaves. The first taste is very bitter, but the more you taste, the more mellow it becomes. Sir, I don't have an intuitive sense of the strength of the Earth Knight, so I can't give more advice, but Henry is not qualified. He has committed theft. Then let's eliminate Henry first, List decided. Henry was strong and brave, but he had committed theft, which was a stain on his record. Zorro and Paul are too old, and there is no need to train them. I suggest giving them up, Marcus said seriously. These 2 were over 40 years old, and were still ordinary Earth Knights. Even without Marcus's suggestion, List did not want to recruit them. You can exclude them. Charles drank a cup of good tea in one gulp. He was a little hesitant, but he still said, Sir, I have some selfish motives. Victor used to humiliate me, and I'm ashamed to be with him. This is just my personal grudge. If you still want to recruit Victor, I'll obey your arrangement. Victor was only 26 years old, and his strength was about to reach the elite Earth Knight level. List liked this person very much, but he did not expect him to have such a grudge against Charles. After thinking about it, he said, Then exclude Victor. Thank you, sir. Charles solemnly saluted. Next, Zambrata also gave his opinion. After a few rounds of discussion, dispute, compromise, and several rounds of conversation, the knight candidates were officially determined. Water attribute Simon Pan, born a freedman, 28 years old, graduated from Knight Academy. Water attribute Norman Twine, born an aristocrat, 23 years old, the second son of a Lord Knight, graduated from Knight Academy. Ice attribute Leslie Dead Leaves, born a freedman, 30 years old, graduated from Knight Academy. Earth attribute Eric Gonwood, born a freedman, 32 years old, graduated from Knight Academy. Fire attribute Daniel, born a serf on the outer island, no surname, 29 years old, his last follower was a Lord Knight, but he died on the battlefield. Wind attribute David Yellowteeth, born a freedman, 24 years old, graduated from Knight Academy. The Knight Academy established in Tulip Castle has basically trained most of the Earth Knights on Coral Island, including List, who have studied in Knight Academy. Teacher Marcus, when all the knights are in place, I will announce the establishment of the Flower Town Knight Squad. You will be the first Knight Captain, responsible for the squad's charge training, and Charles will assist from the side. The two stood up. Yes, sir. List continued to arrange. Advisor Gort and Zambrata cannot relax. Continue to keep in touch with the knight who intends to go to Flower Town to ensure that there is an unqualified knight in the Knight Squad. We can replace new members at any time. Chapter 344. Simon, Norman, Leslie, Eric, Daniel, and David came quickly. Since they had the opportunity to catch up with the rising momentum of the Flower Town, they had to take the initiative. They were either commoners or the second sons of aristocrats, and their rising channels were narrow. An opportunity like the one in the Flower Town might not come across many times in a lifetime. List received the 6 Earth Knights in the castle, but he was not too enthusiastic. Perhaps a month later, some of the 6 Earth Knights would leave the Flower Town. Following was a two-way process. A month of running in was enough to determine whether they should establish a follower relationship with each other. The next morning, on the Knight Square, the red sun rose from the east and the clouds dispersed in the west. List Tulip, Baron of the Flower Town, was dressed in fine steel armor, with the red blood sword at his waist and a fine steel shield in his hand. It was the first time he was dressed in such an eye-catching knight attire. His handsome face was covered by the visor of his helmet. Only his sapphire pupils shone brightly through the mesh. A red cloak fluttered behind him. The black dragon was adorned with a silver-white horse armor. Black, white, and red were dazzling. The fine steel shield was engraved with a blooming black tulip, which was the symbol of the Flower Town and List. Black Dragon was also padded with a cotton cushion embroidered with black tulip. It was not so much a pursuit of riding comfort as a flaunt of the identity of a knight. Aristocrats liked these fancy things. It was indeed a bit of a hindrance to riding, but in the eyes of commoners, it was a symbol of nobility, which could make people crazy. Riding Black Dragon, he slowly walked around the square. Through his visor, he sized up the knights lined up one by one, observing their spirit. Everyone was dressed in fine steel armor, which was provided for them by the castle. The horses he sat on were also qualified war horses, but it was a pity that there were yellow, brown, gray, and flowery war horses. The colors were not uniform. Fortunately, the horses were draped in standard horse armor. Compared to Black Dragon, which only covered its forehead, their horses were tightly wrapped around their head, neck, shoulders, and buttocks. The cushion under their buttocks was also engraved with a black tulip symbol. Everyone held a shield in their left hand and a spear in their right. The sunlight shone on their armors, making them look especially majestic. Silence. Even the horses were silent, only the sound of Black Dragon's hooves could be heard. After a while, List opened his mouth in a clear voice. I, List Tulip, Baron of the Flower Town, regard striving for glory as my life's mission. The road ahead is fraught with danger. I need a loyal companion, a brave knight. You, Earth Knight, stand here. Are you willing to charge with me? The knight shouted in unison, we are willing to charge for Lord Baron. Very well. List suddenly pulled out the red blood sword, pointed the tip of the sword straight to the sky, and said loudly, then, I declare that the Flower Town Night Squad is officially established today. Whoa! 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 The 12 Earth Knight raised their spears and uttered words in response to List's declaration. In the open space on the periphery of the square, many of the youngsters who came to watch saw such a blood-boiling scene and couldn't help but shout, "Whoa!" Karl Hammerstein and Rome Weinbarrel watched the youngsters from the sidelines. Today's scene would always make them remember the Flower Town's prosperity. Although most of the youngsters would eventually go back to farm or work, but it might inspire a few youngsters to work hard and become a future knight. At least in the Flower Town, they had such an opportunity. After the Night Squad's declaration was over, the first training charge began. The galloping horses in full armor almost crushed the earth when they charged. Their momentum was unparalleled, and their chi converged into a torrent that could tear everything apart. The knight charged into the distance, leaving behind only a cloud of dust. Karl walked up to Rome and said in a relaxed manner, "Rome, I leave the patrol team to you. There are some thorns in the team, but I believe that you can handle them." Rome asked, "When do we leave?" "Sir, we'll make arrangements soon." Karl smiled. "A year ago, we were just ordinary retainer knight, without even chi. We followed Sir to the Flower Town to spend the rest of our lives. Who could have thought that we would be in such a situation now? You and I have already become officials, and Odin and Gray are working very smoothly at the administrative office." Karl Hammerstein, Rome Weinbarrel, Odin Insole, and Gray Sickle. List's first 4 retainer knight had very poor talent, with Odin and Gray not even cultivating chi. However, List was a nostalgic person and still arranged good jobs for them. Karl was the defense officer, Rome was the insect officer, Odin was the assistant to the administrative officer Isaiah, and Gray was the assistant to the financial officer Isaiah. But for now, they could not continue to work together in Flower Town. Taking advantage of the formation of the Night Squad, List made a new personnel appointment to Flower Town, dividing half of the officials to work in the port town of Black Horse Island. Karl will go to the port town and serve as the port town's defense officer and insect officer. Rome succeeded as the defense officer of Flower Town, and List's former friend Nemo served as the new insect officer of Flower Town. Most of the officials who followed would move to the port town with their families. Flower Town could no longer satisfy List's appetite. After the formation of the Night Squad, this year's development made him plan to participate. That is to say, the time to make contributions on the battlefield was not far away, and the title of Viscount was not far away. Sooner or later, Black Horse Island would surface. As long as the secrets of the Black Blood horses and rubber are not revealed, it is not surprising to open up a deserted island. I believe that the Count, Levis, and others already know of the existence of Black Horse Island. Instead of sneaking around, it is better to build boldly. Everyone knows that List is ambitious and has a great future. So, isn't it what he should do to open up a deserted island? With the flower brew to fund it and the thorn sprite to plant the potion, it may surprise the Count and Levis that he did not do so. After more than a year of development, no one can ignore his light anymore. He is an excellent tulip family bloodline like Levis, Ulvera, and Lytton. His cowardice in the past was just dormancy, and now his genius is a basic operation. He watched the night training all morning. He did not come back in the afternoon. For him, the formation of the Night Squad in advance was more to complete the task. Training the Blizzard Beast is more important than training the Knight. The Blizzard Beast army is the main force in the future to compete for military merits, and the Knight is just an auxiliary. After a nap, he came to the Black Nightshade field. He called out the smoke mission. Mission completed, reward the auxiliary potion Black Nightshade. In the green Black Nightshade field, some Black Nightshades are blooming, and some have already produced small black fruits. List released his magic eyes and observed the entire Black Nightshade field, and soon found that magic retroaction was not from the worm stalk, but not far from the worm stalk. It was a mutant Black Nightshade with small yellow flowers. Its fruit is not black, but blue-black, a very special color, and most of the magic of the plant is condensed on the fruit. Indeed, as previously guessed, this is a potion. The black nightshade, which was thought to only be a snack to improve the taste, finally has great value. A chi nose. From here, it's about 30 kilometers away from the shore, about a little to the south, a chi replied. 30 kilometers was a 2-hour journey for the flower. After waiting for the flower to return and calculating the ebb tide, List ordered Costo to sail in the direction indicated by a chi. Along the way, a chi surfaced from time to time and used her own trajectory to guide List. Then, List told Costo. Finally, at 3:00 in the afternoon, they saw the coral reef that was already out of the water. Its shape was a bit similar to the splendid reef in the South China Sea. Now that the tide was low, the circular reef was exposed from the water. These reefs developed from coral had already been weathered into fine white sand. It was very soft to step on. Sir, it's really incredible that there are such beautiful coral reefs around the flower town. Even though Captain Costo had been sailing all year round, he still hadn't seen such beautiful reefs. Seagulls circled. The blue seawater was divided by the circular reefs. The outside was dark blue seawater, while the inside was a light blue lagoon. Near the sandy shore, colorful corals could be clearly seen. Captain Costo deduced from the color that the lagoon was only about 10 meters deep, which was very shallow. Because a chi had already scouted the area and found no sea monsters, List had people dive to look for giant clams. Before long, sailors came up one after another with small giant clams. These were giant clams that grew near the coast, the largest of which was only the size of a wash basin. Breaking one open, he found that there was indeed a black pearl inside, but it was only a small black pearl the size of a fingernail. Its magic power was also very dim. Nevertheless, it still made Captain Costo exclaim, "Sir, this is the calm pearl? How can it be so small?" He knew that the calm pearl on the flower was made from black pearls. He had also participated in the fishing of giant clams. He clearly remembered that the smallest black pearl was the size of a fist. Small giant clams naturally only have small black pearls. There are even larger giant clams in the lagoon. Once they are fished up, even larger black pearls can be collected. Can you fish out black pearls as big as the calm pearl? Captain Costo's eyes shone. It's very difficult. Who knows if there are any giant clams living inside? List shook his head. He had a chi observe the lagoon. The largest giant clam was only 1.5 meters in diameter. Compared to the giant clam in the castle, which had a diameter of nearly 3 meters, it was more than half the size. The larger the giant clam, the larger the black pearl. After all, it took a long time to grow from a small black pearl to the size of a wash basin. It was unknown whether the giant clam grew up in the lagoon or not. Lead the sailors to look for larger giant clams. Put the small giant clams back and let them continue to grow. We will fish out a batch of large giant clams. As you wish. Captain Costo immediately dived into the water to look for the large giant clams. The coral reefs above the water did not look too big. Looking from one side to the other side of the lagoon, it felt like there was a distance of 5 to 6 kilometers. The lagoon was approximately oval in shape, with an area of about 20 to 30 square kilometers. It was a bit smaller than the flower town. It was easy to find giant clams, but it was not easy to find large ones. After diving for a long time, the sailors had only found 2 large giant clams with a diameter of more than 1 meter. They were hauled up with ropes and nets. The sky was about to turn dark. This should be considered as the completion of the task of collecting a batch of black pearls, right? List summoned the smoke mission and found that the contents of the mission had not changed. Not knowing whether it was because the black pearls were still in the giant clam's shell or because the number of black pearls collected was not enough, he had the sailors drag the previously discovered smaller giant clams aboard the ship. Only then did they announce their return. After returning to the castle, the first thing they did was to open the giant clam's shell. Unfortunately, there were only 5 fist-sized black pearls in the 2 large giant clams' shell. There were only some fragmented small black pearls in the smaller giant clam's shell, not even the size of a ping-pong ball. It seems that my dream of relying on black pearls to make the sea-calming bead and arming the fleet will have to be put on hold for the time being. I was really lucky to be able to find 3 black pearls suitable for making the sea-calming bead. Liszt sorted out his mood. He summoned the smoke mission again. This time, the smoke serpentines finally changed. Chapter 346. Soul Storage Jar. It sounds like a very mysterious item, a jar that stores souls. It feels like something made by an evil wizard. Liszt pondered. There was nothing about the soul that was not evil. During the previous battle on the Spectre ship, the soul-sinking wood obtained from Curtis Truth was tainted with the resentment of countless people. After all, the soul-sinking wood was made by sacrificing an entire ship's worth of people. The soul disruptor obtained from Mylisai Truth was also extracted from the blood of the dead. The wizard's triangular theory of magic, matter, and spirit would itself prompt them to explore the spiritual realm, the soul. Liszt also wanted to know the meaning of the soul, but he wanted to live a comfortable life more. At this moment, he was thinking about how the soul storage jar would appear in front of him. At present, there are 2 wizards in the town. Elksun is making the potion, and Glanny was also invited by me to redesign the new calm pearl for the upcoming thorns. So he guessed. The soul storage jar could either be obtained from Elksun or Glanny. As for how to obtain it, it was not clear. But if neither of them took the initiative to hand it over, he would ask carefully and not let his reward fall into the hands of others. While thinking, the smoke serpentines had changed. Mission: the wheat settlement's wheat leaves have withered and turned yellow, near the wheat sprite worm's worm stalk. The farmers tried their best to water the compost, but it still did not work. A batch of wheat seedlings were even burned to death. As the Lord, you should solve the problem. Reward: a sprite worm. After reading the mission, Liszt understood that a new wheat sprite worm was about to be born in the wheat settlement. Sure enough, when spring came, everything sprouted, and the Flower Town sprite worms were constantly being bred. The withered and yellow wheat leaves must be caused by the large amount of nutrients needed during the breeding of the sprite worm. However, the farmers had been desperately fertilizing, but they still could not stop the wheat leaves from continuing to wither and turn yellow. Why is this happening? With a little inspiration in his mind, he had a new guess and quickly went to the worm room on the 2nd floor. In the big box for the sprites to live in, Ella occupied the center position, and a dozen sprite worms surrounded it, crawling meaninglessly. Occasionally, they would lick the jade powder. Life was very pleasant. However, there was a disharmonious sprite worm among them, the wheat sprite worm. It seemed rather impatient at the moment. Through the contract that connected their minds, Liszt could feel its inner world. Although it wasn't clear, it was sufficiently expressed. Because it was affected by something, it became restless and even felt a faint sense of hostility. Little guy, come here. He stretched out his hand and let the wheat worm climb up. At this time, Ella, who was sleeping, suddenly woke up. She grabbed the wheat worm from Liszt's hand and put it back in the box. Wow! It had no special meaning, just a prank. Then, it received Liszt's vicious finger-flicking god art. It covered its head and shrank into a corner, feeling wronged. Wah, you better behave yourself. I'm going to treat your skin properly. Liszt picked up the wheat worm again and threw down some harsh words. Wow! Ella protested. It didn't think it was very naughty. Liszt pointed at it. Watch your skin. Wow! 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 In the midst of Ella's protest, List left the worm house and rushed to the wheat settlement. When he arrived, he happened to see Isaiah in the farmland, discussing something with the serfs. After the greeting, List already knew that they must be dealing with the withered wheat seedlings, but he still couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing?" Isaiah hurriedly replied, "Sir, there is something wrong with the wheat seedlings in the wheat settlement, especially the wheat seedlings near the worm stalk. The leaves are gradually withering and turning yellow. It happened in the past 2 days. At first, I thought there was a problem with the worm stalk, but the worm stalk is still healthy. I also asked Mr. Carter and he told me that the wheat sprite worm is healthy. He wondered if there was a lack of nutrition and even if it was breeding a sprite worm. However, fertilization was useless, which made him very puzzled. If I can't solve it, I'm going to ask Sir for advice. In the face of this situation, I really can't do anything." The abnormal situation in Flower Town's agriculture was originally reported directly to the castle. Because every anomaly could be related to the breeding of a sprite worm. However, after many false positives, List cancelled the procedure. Anomalies in farming were too common, and the vast majority of them had nothing to do with sprite worms. So much so that apart from the sprite worms reminded by the smoke mission, there was no additional harvest. "I understand." List did not blame Isaiah. Without the help of the smoke mission, he was not necessarily better than Isaiah and the others in managing the town. Especially in the face of this special situation. I think a new wheat sprite worm was born here. However, the location of its birth is a bit conflicting, near the wheat worm stalk. Therefore, the 2 wheat sprites are competing, causing the surrounding wheat to wither and turn yellow. Although there was little friction between the sprites, it did not mean that the sprites were friendly to each other. Ella's slap to Nami was proof of this. The existing wheat sprite worm and the upcoming wheat sprite worm obviously did not have friendly thoughts with each other, which led to the current anomaly. The solution adopted by List was very simple. "Little guy, put away your worm stalk." The anxious wheat sprite worm could not resist List's thoughts. Soon, it aimed at its worm stalk and spat out a mouthful of magic power. Then, the worm stalk grew at a speed visible to the naked eye and quickly turned into a wheat seed, which was then swallowed by the wheat sprite worm. "I will remove the wheat worm stalk. You should carefully manage the wheat field. Fertilize less if there is excess nutrition, fertilize more if there is insufficient nutrition. Pay attention to watering and weeding. Don't let my second wheat sprite worm die prematurely. Sir, please rest assured. I will personally supervise the serfs to take care of the wheat field." The sprite worm's worm stalk could at most affect more than 100 mu of land. Therefore, List chose a better location in another wheat field and let the wheat sprite worm spit out its worm stalk again. The seed fell to the ground. Once again, it grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, it became green and produced ears of wheat. The ears of wheat were cyan and would remain in a half-ripe state. The mystical worm stalk was never an ordinary plant. It was more like the embodiment of magic power. After moving its worm stalk, the wheat sprite worm felt a sense of exhaustion. The worm stalk was not suitable for moving often, because each time the sprite worm cast a spell, it would greatly damage its vitality. Fortunately, the jade powder could make up for this damage. After a while, it would be full of energy again. Chapter 347. The probability of a sprite evolving into a lesser sprite was very low. Out of 10 or 20 sprite worms, only 2 or 3 may evolve, and there was a high chance that the evolution would fail. As for whether the evolution probability had anything to do with transplanting the worm stalk, List was not clear. There was no evidence that the two were related. When Ella was still a thorn worm, its worm stalk was planted in Tulip Castle. After migrating to Flower Town, it began to evolve and succeeded. Although there was the help of the smoke mission, it at least showed that the worm stalk could still evolve and succeed after the migration. Perhaps, for sprite worms, the migrating sprite grass is like rubber worm triplets? List suddenly thought. The power of the triplets should be regarded as a kind of magic, which would not affect the evolution of the rubber worms. Otherwise, the smoke mission would dig out their ability, which would be a trap for List. This was not in line with the usual style of the smoke mission. The triplets will recover after resting for a while after using the power of the triplets. The sprite will also recover after resting for a while. Perhaps for the sprite worm, this is like a magician releasing magic, which will certainly consume a little strength, but can be exercised more. By constantly releasing the power of the triplets and constantly migrating the worm stock, the sprite worm's magic mastery? List felt that this guess was not very reliable. The power of the triplets could also be explained by exercise and strengthening. How could the migration of the worm stock not be regarded as exercise? What kind of sprite worm would pull up its worm stock? As a plant, shouldn't it be planted in the field and grow steadily? The root of the sprite worm is the worm stalk. Migrating the worm stalk should be regarded as hurting the foundation. The power of the triplets should not be. List could only judge this way. At least the triplets were in good condition. There was no negative effect of using the power of the triplets at all. List waved his hand. The smoke mission emerged. It was still the original mission. It was not completed because of the worm stalk migration. It is probably because the wheat field has not been completely repaired, so the mission is not complete. Let's wait for 2 days and see if this is the case. After solving the conflict with the wheat worm, List mainly stared at Xiaofan and Glanny. The two magicians showed no signs of turning in the soul storage jar. One was peacefully making potions and making witty remarks at the banquet, while the other was immersed in making the sea-calming divine pearl and was not even willing to take a bath. Their apprentices were also working obediently, and there was nothing unusual. There was no news about the jar from other channels either. This made List a little depressed. Watching the two sorcerers eating and drinking, he was not very happy. It seems that if I don't force them, they won't hand over the storage jar of souls. Just as he was thinking about how to force the two to hand over the soul storage jar. However, something unexpected happened the next day. The insect protection team came to report that the horn sounded at the seaside. This was the signal for communication between him and the siren He. He had told the insect protection team that was guarding the fragrant coconut tree worm stalk to report to him as soon as they heard the horn. Therefore, he knew that He was looking for him. If there was nothing important, He would not blow the horn. She liked to stay in her room and read and study magic. After arriving at the Sea View Villa, He said in a panic, "Brother, He picked up an unconscious human being on the sea, and I don't know what to do with her." Following the direction of Chi's finger, List saw a pale woman lying on the bed in the wooden house on the second floor. She looked like a dead person, and her wet clothes were obviously a magic cloak. This was the standard dress of a sorcerer. This unconscious woman was a sorcerer. Then he saw a pot that looked like a teapot on the bedside table. Soul storage jar. List's inspiration burst in an instant. His previous guess was wrong. I'm afraid that Xiaofan and Glanny have nothing to do with the soul storage jar. The clue of destiny guidance appeared on the unconscious sorcerer in front of him. Chi, what's the matter with this teapot? It was hidden in her clothes. It was in the way, so Chi took it out and put it on the table. Chi was nervous. Brother, is she dead? He checked his breathing. It was very stable. She's not dead yet. List touched his chin, thinking that the sorcerer should not be in a coma caused by drowning, because drowning people should not be breathing so normally. He then reached out and touched the position of the sorcerer's heart. The heartbeat was also steady. It seems that she didn't drown, but simply fell into a coma. There are no doctors in the town, only a few old people who can decoct herbs. I'll ask them to come over, and Teacher Marcus should also know a little about how to save people. List said to Chi, "You go away first. Okay. Achi returned to the shell and swam back to the sea. List asked the retainer knight to ask for help immediately, and he continued to stay by the sorcerer's side. Looking at the unconscious sorcerer, he was helpless. He didn't know how to save people, he only knew the theory of artificial respiration, and the key was that the other party didn't seem to need artificial respiration. After all, she was breathing. So he directly picked up the teapot on the cabinet and studied it. It should be a copper teapot, but it was obvious that it was not used to hold tea. There was no such thing as a teapot in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Because only List had real tea. Other people just drank milk tea made from the fruit of the black tea tree in a cup, and did not need a teapot. It looks a bit like Aladdin's magic lamp in the Arabian Nights. Touching the copper teapot, List couldn't help but wipe the teapot. He was looking forward to the sudden emergence of a genie made of blue smoke, fulfilling his 3 wishes. However, it didn't. He shook the teapot. There was nothing in it, and there was no teapot lid. It was a hole, probably only the mouth of the teapot was the mouth of the pot. So, is it a soul storage pot? After casting magic eyes, there were no traces of magic power on it. It looked just like an ordinary tea set. A teapot carried by a sorcerer was definitely not an ordinary item. But List had no clue. He put down the teapot and carefully looked at the unconscious sorcerer. Her pale face made her look like a dead person. Her appearance was ordinary, and there were some freckles on her face. Her hair was brown, and she was about 1.65 meters tall. She was neither fat nor thin. There was no one around, so he didn't have to worry about anything. He directly searched the sorcerer's clothes with his hand, looking for anything else that could prove the other person's identity. In the end, he only felt a pendant on her neck. The pendant was pendant with a silver coin, not a silver coin that could be bought or sold, but a silver round metal coin. It was very light and felt a bit like mithril. The front was engraved with a triangular pattern with an eye in the middle. This was the symbol of a sorcerer, the Eye of Truth. Below the triangle of the Eye of Truth, there were several wavy curves, which probably represented water. On the back was a line of small serpentines. May the voyage of truth be accompanied by the sea of knowledge, Chrissy Truth. Chapter 348. So, is she called Chrissy Truth, or is the person who gave this silver coin called Chrissy Truth? List thought as he played with the silver coin. Starting with the word wish represented the wishes of a friend, indicating that the silver coin was given to her by someone else. Then, there were 2 explanations for Chrissy Truth. One was the unconscious wizard's real name, and the other was the name of her friend. However, when a friend gave their blessings and left their name, it was usually followed by a symbol. There was no symbol on the silver coin. This line of serpentines was written on the back of the silver coin in the form of 3 lines of serpentines. Therefore, there was no need for symbols, and there was no way to determine whose name it was. Of course. The above was just a momentary change in List's thoughts. It did not matter what the other party's name was. The silver coin could not solve any identity problems. For the time being, your name is Chrissy. List stuffed the pendant back into the other party's neck. However, he had no intention of putting the copper kettle back. According to the prevailing laws of the lords, items that drifted ashore at sea belonged to the local lord. Because the lord owned everything on the land, even the wizard Chrissy, she could be classified as an enemy trespassing on the territory, and the lord had the right to arrest her. However, the flower town, like most of the lord's territories, was open to the public. As long as one did not come with malice, they would not be casually questioned. This copper kettle could be regarded as a reward for saving a life. He was a reasonable lord who abided by the rules. Sir. Marcus had already arrived, along with several elderly people. List pointed to the bed. There is an unconscious wizard floating by the sea. Teacher Marcus, see if you can wake her up. The rest of you, see if there are any herbal prescriptions that can treat an unconscious person. Marcus observed for a while and shook his head. Sir, I can't see what's wrong with her. She does not look like a drowning person. Several elderly people could not see the problem either. They could only use some simple herbs to treat common minor illnesses. In this world full of magic power, a knight with chi could constantly recuperate and improve their physique. Therefore, it was very difficult for them to fall sick. Therefore, medicine was very underdeveloped. Once the commoners fell seriously ill, they were basically waiting for death. There was no possibility of treatment. Liszt had the idea of developing medicine, but he had no idea where to start. For the commoners, instead of spending the exorbitant medical fees to treat illnesses, it was more practical to cultivate do qi. After all, as long as one ate well and practiced diligently, they would be able to cultivate battle qi. However, there was no such high probability of curing an illness. An old man said with a trembling voice, "My lord, this mage lady may be too weak. She will wake up naturally when her body recovers." "It's possible." Liszt nodded and said to the manservant, "Thomas, give each of the elderly a copper coin as compensation for their delay in work." It was only right for a few people who were about to be buried to make a trip here and give them some compensation. "Yes, master." "Ah, thank you, my lord." The elderly people happily took the copper coins and left. Liszt was still discussing with Marcus. "There is a mage floating on the beach. Teacher Marcus, what do you think?" "Mages are very weak. Compared to us knights, they are no different from ordinary commoners. Therefore, I don't think she could have been soaked in the sea for too long. Furthermore, there is no sign of her drowning. I suspect that she may be a mage from Coral Island, or a mage brought by a passing ship." Liszt said, "Although I don't know how many mages there are on Coral Island, but from the exposed mages, none of them match her physical characteristics. She looks relatively young, probably no more than 25 years old. It is impossible for there to be such a young mage on the island. Maybe she is a magic apprentice?" "Magic apprentice?" Liszt thought for a moment. There is also this possibility. So why did she fall into the sea, and how did she float here smoothly? According to a chi, she was picked up on the sea. At that time, she was floating on the sea with her clothes. This was somewhat against the laws of physics. The aquamarine sea was not the Dead Sea, it could not float people. I can't explain it, but I think she must be watched more closely. Mages are dangerous people. Marcus said seriously. He didn't like mages. He never had a good face for Elksun and Glanny. Not to mention a mage of unknown origin. After thinking for a moment, Liszt decided to move her to a residential area, find a house, arrange for someone to take care of her, and let the patrols keep a close watch on her. Once she wakes up, they should inform him immediately. Then he called a chi with a horn. "I have taken the unconscious mage to the town to take care of her." A chi, human mages are dangerous. They have an impulsive curiosity about unknown creatures. You'd better not come into contact with mages before you reach adulthood. Well, a chi understands. The little siren was a little depressed. It's a pity that a chi's feet can't grow out. I can't live with my brother and live like a human. There will be such a day. Liszt rubbed her hair. Suddenly, he had a burst of inspiration. He let a chi sit on a chair, then took out a roll of tape measure and measured the length of a chi's legs. "According to your description, when you were born, there was seawater below your knees. 41 years later, there is only seawater below your ankles. If we assume that your growth rate remains stable, we can measure how many years it will take for you to reach adulthood by the proportion of your legs." "Ah, is that okay, brother?" A chi suddenly had little stars in her eyes. She didn't know if she was happy because she was going to know when she would reach adulthood or because of Liszt's profound knowledge. Liszt smiled and lifted a chi's calf. He put one end of the tape measure on her knee and stretched it to her ankle. It was measured to be 41 centimeters. According to the general proportion of the human body, I estimate that the length of your feet is about 12 centimeters, so we can get a binary linear equation. Well, it doesn't have to be so complicated. Basically, you will grow 1 centimeter a year. 41 centimeters. 41 centimeters. The remaining length of her feet was about 12 centimeters, which meant that Achi still had 12 years before she reached adulthood. Achi's little face immediately fell. Brother, is it 12 years before I reach adulthood? List was also depressed. Basically, if nothing goes wrong and the inference is correct, the speed of your long feet will not exceed the speed of your long legs. So, it will indeed take 12 years for you to reach adulthood. Of course, if your feet are small, maybe 10 years or less. Achi was at most 1.55 meters tall, and her feet wouldn't be very big. Maybe they would be 3-inch golden lotuses. Chapter 349. This chapter is a free chapter. Since many readers were already confused about the characters, I listed the main characters so that everyone could compare them. Tulip family member, Lady Penelope, the protagonist's grandmother, lives alone in a small castle. Greg Tiles, the protagonist's grandfather, the Viscount of Tahiti. He has never appeared before, and has only been heard of by Madame Penelope. Lee William Tulip, the protagonist's father, a sky knight at the level of a sword saint, Earl of Coral Island. Melissa Longtaro, the protagonist's mother, has passed away. Madame Marie, the protagonist's stepmother, the second countess. Levis Tulip, the protagonist's brother, elite Earth Knight, Viscount for life. Elvira Tulip, the protagonist's sister, Earth Knight, Baron of Falcon Town. List Tulip, protagonist. Lytton Tulip, the protagonist's half-brother, a trainee knight. Taro family member, Merlin Longtaro, the protagonist's maternal grandfather, a perfected sky knight, Marquis of Red Crab Island, former captain of the court fleet. Masiro Longtaro, the protagonist's uncle, a normal-level sky knight. Mipal Longtaro, cousin of the protagonist, Masiro's only son, elite Earth Knight, pursues the Grand Duke's daughter. Melinda Longtaro, aunt of the main character, sister of Messier and older sister of Melissa. Roland Pinecone, uncle of the protagonist, Viscount of Longtail City, elite Earth Knight. Russell Pinecone, the cousin of the protagonist. His wife is Jackie Broccoli. They have a 1-year-old daughter, Rosie Pinecone. Raleigh Pinecone, the cousin of the protagonist. The servants in Flower Town's castle, Carter Claypot, butler, over 50 years old, unmarried, wish to spend the rest of his life with the Tulip family. Mawson Paddy Field, housekeeper, unmarried, good at making milk tea. Abby Ladle, chef. Under List's guidance, she has become a famous chef. Thomas Scissors, valet. Tom Pigsty, second manservant. Lily Bathtub, maid. She has a good figure and looks. She's the face of a castle maid. Irene Four Fingers, kitchen maid, wants to stay in the kitchen forever. One-Eyed Barton, coachman, a refugee from Little Kerchief Island. Officials of the Flower Town's administrative office, Gort Mast, Flower Town's consultant, List's tutor, and a destitute Lord Knight. He has a lover, Freya, and an illegitimate son, Donald Mast. Isaiah Moss, administrative officer. Blair Steele, financial officer. Carl Hammerstein, originally List's retainer knight, later served as defense officer, and has now been transferred to the port town. Rome Winebarrel, originally List's retainer knight, later served as insect officer, and has now taken over Carl's defense officer. Zambrata, an aristocrat deprived of his title, has traveled to the Steel Ridge Kingdom and its vassal states, and is now serving as a diplomat. Costo, captain of the Flower, concurrently serving as the town's maritime officer, a refugee from Little Kerchief Island. Nemo, List's friend, the second son of a minor aristocrat, has taken over Rome's insect officer. Members of the Night Squad: Marcus Wheel, captain of the Night Squad, List's tutor, a wind-attributed elite Earth Knight, and a sharpshooter. Charles Trapp, a wandering Lord Knight, a thunder-attributed elite Earth Knight. Rondo Kettle, Captain Layton's illegitimate son, an Earth-attributed Earth Knight. Russell Steele, born under a free name, a fire-attributed Earth Knight. Rick Footprint, List's classmate, the second son of a minor aristocrat, 19 years old, an Earth-attributed Earth Knight. Griffin Haystack, born as an orphan, stutters a little, an Earth-attributed Earth Knight. Simon Plate, Norman Twine, Leslie Dead Leaves, Eric Dry Wood, Daniel, David Yellowteeth. The 6 new Earth Knights have not yet established a follower relationship. Philip Wool, Xavier Cow Dung, List's retainer knight. Others: Roderick Golden Wheatgrass, Marquis of Golden Island, about to become Levis's father-in-law. Roger Golden Wheatgrass, Roderick's son. Rolia Golden Wheatgrass, Roderick's daughter, about to become Levis's wife. Ronesa Golden Wheatgrass, Roderick's youngest daughter. Meeting Levis was like meeting a rainbow. Durante Hyacinth, Count of Red Crab Island. Dunico Hyacinth, Durante's daughter, loved the piano, and had a good time with Liszt. Athena Salmon, daughter of a Viscount of Red Crab Island. She confessed her love to Liszt, and should be married now. Wallace Pineapple Green, Marquis of Deep Throat Island, has not yet appeared, but has been mentioned several times. Jonas Gravel, Viscount of Coral Island, Viscount of Gravel City, son is Brandon Gravel. Patrick Clover, Viscount of Coral Island, Viscount of Beer Island, son is Aubrey Clover, a big fat man. Captain Mickey, Baron, a captain of Coral Island's Orders of Chivalry, equivalent to a deputy head. Captain Lydon Kettle, father of Londo Kettle, a captain of Coral Island's Orders of Chivalry. Frank, Levis's tutor. He has a daughter named Shirley, who is List's childhood sweetheart. Elkson Truth, wizard, making potions for Liszt. Glanny Truth, wizard, making calm beads for Liszt. Sapphire family member, Anderson Sapphire, 1st Grand Duke, Dragon Knight, mount a sapphire dragon. Anflor Sapphire, 2nd Grand Duke. Andit Sapphire, 3rd Grand Duke. Annette Sapphire, ghost ships Curtis Truth's undying lover. Because he did not have long to live, he chose to be a dragon domain lord. Finally, he was stopped and his soul was exiled forever. Inferred to be the 3rd Grand Duke's elder brother. Anchit Sapphire, 4th Grand Duke. Andrew Sapphire, 5th Grand Duke. Incumbent Sapphire Duke. Perfection level Sky Knight, unable to ride a dragon. Angela Sapphire, 5th Grand Duke's youngest daughter. Meopal has been pursuing her. Her identity has basically been confirmed. She is a social butterfly. Cohen Magic Goat, from the distant Magic Goat family, once a Grand Duchy's marquis, but was killed because of a palace coup involving Annette. Curtis Truth, Marquis Cohen's niece, a great wizard. In order to pursue Annette's soul, she voluntarily became a lich. In the end, she died at the hands of the protagonist. Chapter 350. A chi, maybe for a siren, 10 years is just a blink of an eye. Liszt said with some emotion. He not only calculated when a chi would reach adulthood, but also how long a chi's life would be. 41 plus 12 was equal to 53. According to the human age of 16 and the life expectancy of 100 years, a siren's life expectancy was about 330 years. A big elf's life expectancy was 200 years, a dragon elf's life expectancy was 500 years, and a siren was in between. 330 years, with 25 years as a generation, humans may have given birth to more than a dozen generations. If Liszt did not become the lord of the dragon domain, perhaps it would be his grandson's 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 grandson who would attend a chi's funeral. Thinking about it this way, it was quite funny. Humans only live for 100 years, will a Qi live for 330 years? A Qi was a little confused. But, brother, a Qi doesn't want to live that long. Well, a Qi just wants to live as long as brother. List picked up her little hand, kissed it, and said gently, this is just a calculation. Maybe you can live longer, maybe you can't live for 300 years. Let the future decide what will happen in the future. Sooner or later, I will ride a dragon and become a dragon knight. It's also good to become the lord of the dragon domain, that way I can live for 400 or 500 years. A Qi smiled and let List hold her little hand. Well, brother can become the lord of the dragon domain, so that a Qi and brother can live for hundreds of years. When I become a dragon knight and the lord of the dragon domain, I will take you to explore the world. I don't want to be a grand duke or a king. A dragon could suppress a country, so a dragon knight could choose to create a country, but not all dragon knight like to create a country. Many dragon knight only enjoyed the title of grand duke, and they would still occasionally fight for the kingdom. It was normal for a kingdom to have several dragon knight. Especially the dragon knight provided by the kingdom, it was necessary to serve the kingdom. List could not decide what kind of dragon he would ride in the future, but at least it was not so attractive to be the king of a country. If he had several dragons, he could give one or two to his descendants and let them enjoy being king. When they left the seascape villa, List felt his blood boiling in his heart. No matter what, I am destined to ride a dragon and become the lord of Dragon City, for the sake of longevity. In the past, he did not envy longevity. He felt that 100 years was enough for him to live a wonderful life. Now, he was looking forward to immortality because this world was too big. There were too many places worth exploring and beautiful things worth cherishing. The unconscious magician did not wake up for a long time. To prevent her from starving to death in her coma, List ordered people to feed her a little normal milk every day, prolonging her life. He himself continued to study the copper teapot. Basically, it can be judged that this is the soul storage tank, because there is no information about the soul storage tank in any other channel. He even asked Elksun and Glanny, who knew little about the soul and knew nothing about the soul storage tank. So, how does this soul storage jar work? I poured my battle chi into it, but there was no reaction at all. According to the explanation of the smoke mission, this was a magic equipment. If it was a magic equipment, it would be stimulated by magic and activated, but it did not react at all. Although the spout of the teapot was a hole that could be filled with water, even if it was filled with boiling water, there was still no reaction. It was like a real teapot without a lid. However, the spout of the teapot is too thin to make tea. As a last resort, List took the copper teapot and asked Elksun to check if he could get a hint. After rubbing it for a while, Elksun shook his head. Lord Baron, I can see that this teapot has traces of magic carving, and there must be some kind of magic engraved inside it. But unfortunately, I don't know how this magic works, and I can't activate it. Let Glanny judge. Glanny explained in a similar way, it was definitely made by a great magician. The technique is exquisite, especially the engraving of the magic runes, which I have never seen before. Baron List, since you don't know what it is for, why don't you give it to me to study? I am very interested in it. Sorry, it's still useful to me for the time being. How could he give it to an outsider? List returned to the castle with the copper teapot. List was a little uncertain. Neither Elksun nor Glanny can explain this soul storage jar. There is probably no magician on Coral Island who can explain it. If Mylisai is not dead, she can probably explain one or two things. She has studied souls. Speaking of souls, I seem to have a 36D spectre. A spectre is also a form of soul. The floating bottle can hold specters, and this soul storage jar should obviously be able to hold more souls. Give it a try? Then give it a try. After deciding, List no longer hesitated. He found a cool place, took out a floating bottle made of unknown metal, and smeared a little of Phil the old leathersmith's blood on it. In the field of vision of the magic eyes, countless lines formed by magic power emerged on the floating bottle and formed a picture, depicting a bizarre world. The next moment, the bottle opened. A dim light shot out, and the 36D spectre floated above the bottle. There was a moment of hesitation. Then, the spectre seemed to wake up, waving its hands with long nails, and immediately rushed towards Liszt. However, Liszt just raised the red blood sword, which was filled with fire-attributed chi, and the spectre was scared motionless. Quite obedient. Marcus was able to scare the spectre, so Liszt was naturally not afraid. He raised the copper teapot and pointed the spout at the spectre. However, the spectre was silly and did not respond. Useless? Liszt shook the copper teapot vigorously, but still did not attract the spectre. This was different from what he had imagined. He simply aimed the copper teapot directly at the spectre's body and shoved it in. This was a broken pot method. Liszt didn't expect it to really cause a change. After touching the spectre's illusory body, the copper teapot burst into a bright light and instantly engulfed the 36D spectre. The next moment, it returned to normal. But Liszt knew that the spectre's soul had been contained because the copper teapot had become a little heavier. After shaking it, it felt like there was a little more water inside, just a little bit. But this slight change, for the elite Earth Knights, was still clear to see. He gently tilted the spout of the teapot and poured out. No water flowed out, only bursts of smoke. The smoke rose and turned into the appearance of a young girl, no longer the image of the 36D spectre, but a girl with a clear face. Although the girl's eyes were smoke, they were very vivid and lifelike. First, she looked around in confusion. Chapter 351. The 36D had become a young girl, but she still had a 36D bust. When she was still a 3D ghost, her face was barely visible. Now, it was very clear. There was a vague shadow of Curtis truth. She was very beautiful. But the style was the complete opposite. Curtis always had the gloom of a lich, surrounded by green light, which made people feel very uncomfortable. The misty girl in front of him, on the other hand, was white and looked somewhat holy. You don't remember who you are? Liszt looked at the soul storage jar in his hand, feeling very incredulous. With just a suction and release, the originally ferocious and terrifying ghost impressively became holy light. It seemed that this soul storage jar was definitely a magic equipment of the divine artifact level. And it really did look a little like Aladdin's magic lamp. At least the girl's body was like a cloud of smoke coming out of the spout of a teapot. The upper body was human, and the lower body was still smoke. The girl lowered her eyelids and seemed to be thinking. Liszt did not disturb her. In fact, he had some speculations. The 36D ghost originated from the keel fixation, from a shipwreck of the magic goat family. There were 5 boxes of treasures in the shipwreck. 2 boxes were magic books, 1 box of crystals, 1 box of jade, and 1 box of mithril. To be able to carry such goods, it showed that this shipwreck was not ordinary. It should be an important ship of the magic goat family. Then, being sealed in the keel fixation of such a ship, it was not difficult to guess the identity of the girl. She should be related to the magic goat family. In addition, the more he looked at her, the more similar she looked to Curtis, which further supported Liszt's speculation. She might be a member of the magic goat family, or even had her soul stripped by Curtis and sealed in the keel fixation. The magic goat family, a family that disappeared in the long river of time, but again and again pestered Liszt. He did not know whether to feel honored or unlucky. He also thought that Milesi Truth, who was killed by Paris, seemed to be related to the magic goat family. Her research notes had the logo of a goat on them. And Chris, the unconscious mage, did not know if she was also related to the magic goat family. At least the soul storage jar seemed to be the work of an evil mage like Curtis. He pondered for a moment. The girl raised her head absent-mindedly and looked at List again. I can't remember. I don't think I'm a human anymore. I look like a soul now. Yes, you should be in a soul state right now, but you're different from the souls I've seen before. They all exist in the form of light. You, on the other hand, are somewhat similar to smoke. In addition, you were previously a ghost that was sealed in the dragon fixing bone. List shook the soul storage jar in his hand. It shook along with the smoke coming out of the teapot. This affected the young girl's entire body, causing her to tremble like water ripples. However, the young girl did not feel any discomfort. She just stared blankly at the soul storage jar and the smoke connecting to her body. He muttered to himself, Keel. Dragon Beast Sailboat. Truth. Magic Goat. Who am I? Who am I? Dragon Beast Sailboat? List's ears twitched as he heard a new term. He guessed that this was the name of the sailboat that used the keel fixing technique, the unique technology of the Magic Goat family, Dragon Beast Sailboat. Hearing her say, Magic Goat, it was obvious that she was indeed a member of the Magic Goat family. List interrupted her troubled thoughts. I think I can give you a hint. The Dragon Beast Sailboat should be a sailboat that is unique to the Magic Goat family. As for you, maybe you are a member of the Magic Goat family. I am a member of the Magic Goat family. The young girl seemed to have her memory triggered, but she could not remember. Do you know more? List raised his eyebrows. Do you know Curtis Truth? Curtis. The young girl's face suddenly changed, her expression was full of panic, and her body made of smoke and light began to flicker. It's her. It's her. Curtis Truth, that terrible woman. She killed me. She massacred the goat gathering, and all those who did not obey her orders were killed by her. Then, she suddenly held her head and wailed in pain. Don't kill me. I am Virginia, I am your sister. Don't kill me, Curtis. He did not know if it was too painful, or if the time was up. She turned back into a cloud of smoke and returned to the soul storage tank. When List shook it, he could feel the liquid inside, but he could not pour it out. He had to put the soul storage tank into the gem space. A living thing would soon die in the gem space, but souls were probably different. The floating bottle had been in it for a long time, and 36D ghosts were still very normal. The soul storage tank should have a similar function. Back in the castle. He took out a thick piece of bast paper and wrote the words, Dragon Sailboat, Virginia Truth, and Goat Gathering, in Serpentine. The Goat Gathering is probably an organization of a group of wizards. Virginia may be Curtis' sister. Maybe she has mastered the dragon bone fixing technique. List no longer cared about the grudges of the past. It was nothing more than a melodramatic story of a twisted crazy woman for love who harmed her family. Whether it was righteous or evil, it had nothing to do with him. He was more concerned about the dragon bone fixing technique. In the vast sea, the chances of encountering sea monsters were indeed not high, but in case of encountering one, the dragon bone fixing would release dragon might, which would definitely increase his chances of survival. Virginia Truth hid in the soul storage tank and could not pour it out. Chris Truth lay in bed and could not wake up. In a flash, it was late May, and the weather officially turned into a scorching summer. Good news came one after another. First, the sprite worms bred by the 4 snake blood fruit potted plants fell to the ground, bit List's fingers, and became his contracted sprite worms. The 4 snake blood fruit worms, all pale white with a red stripe on their bodies, were very beautiful. The snake blood fruit worms were transported by List to Black Horse Island and planted in a newly reclaimed wasteland on Black Horse Island. The snake blood fruit would attract snakes, and there were no poisonous snakes on Black Horse Island, so there was no need to worry about attracting poisonous snakes. The only thing to be careful was not to attract sea snakes and sea monsters. After the snake blood fruit worm, the apple sprite also landed smoothly. The apple tree, which had become a worm stalk, became stronger and more vigorous. This year, it produced a bunch of small green apples. Unfortunately, they will not continue to grow, whether it is spring, summer, autumn, or winter, it will remain in this state. Many small aristocrats especially like to go to the forest in winter to find sprite worms. If they are lucky, they can find green worm stalks from a large area of dead trees. Of course, the probability is very low, and the distribution of wild sprite worms is very thin. During the winter of Black Horse Island, Marcus and others have searched several laps and have not found any worm stalks. The pale green apple sprite worm, lying in the palm of List's hand, looked fat, like a piece of green nephrite. I do not intend to transplant this apple tree worm stalk, so, Mr. Carter, please contact Isaiah, the administrative officer, and transform the castle into an apple orchard. Chapter 352. Shortly after the apple sprite worm was born, List's 18th sprite worm was also about to arrive. Under the careful care of the serfs, the yellowing of the wheat field's leaves was finally restored to an exuberant green. One of the tall wheat seedlings showed an unusual growth. It had already condensed magic power and turned into a worm stalk. The smoke mission also changed just in time. Mission completed. Reward: 1 wheat sprite worm. List was very happy with the birth of the wheat worm. This was because wheat was one of the most important crops. The little wheat worm that could increase the yield of wheat was worth more than 4,000 gold coins in the market. Before the New Year's Day, it took me almost half a year to harvest 5 sprite worms: the peanut sprite worm, the black nightshade sprite worm, the tomato sprite worm, the fragrant coconut sprite worm and the corn grass sprite worm. After the New Year's Day, before half a year had passed, I had already harvested 9 sprite worms: the wheat sprite worm, the apple sprite worm, the rubber sprite worm, and the snake blood fruit sprite worm. Even though there weren't a lot of them, there were definitely a lot of them, especially the rubber worms and snake blood fruit worms, which were sent in groups. Just a few days ago, the rubber worm used the power of the 3 elements for the second time to restore the rubber trees near the rubber plantation to their best state, greatly increasing the speed and quantity of rubber harvesting. Port Town has used rubber water to build houses and roads. This would be the first modern town under List's rule. The smoke in front of him slowly drifted, forming new serpentines. Mission: perhaps you didn't discover the meaning of the silver coin pendant in your haste. It is by no means an ordinary silver coin. It has been blessed by magic power and may be able to awaken a wizard in a coma. Reward: a magician in distress. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. List did not hesitate and went straight to the town to visit the unconscious magician. Guard the door. Don't disturb me while I treat the magician. After dismissing the servant and the retainer knight, he walked straight to the bedside and looked at Chrissy, who was carefully taken care of by several women. When they first fished her up, her face was pale and bloodless, like a dead person. However, her face was now very rosy, but her appearance was still ordinary. Out of 10 points, List could only give her a passing 6 points. The silver coin pendant around her neck was still there. When he was fiddling with it, he didn't notice anything unusual about the silver coin. At most, the material was special, and it was probably made of the lightest magic metal, mithril. Now that the smoke mission had reminded him, he cast magic eyes, carefully observed, and tried to inject chi. The moment he infused the silver coin with his chi, a few magic patterns appeared on it. Then, there was the sound of a mage chanting. It sounded like heavenly music, but the content of the singing could not be understood. There were only a few syllables repeated. Is it Moon Whisper? List wanted to capture the melody. According to the records of several magic books, the magicians of the ancient Moon Empire could cast blessing spells. Is this melody a blessing spell? The Moon Empire was the source of all civilizations in every country. Magicians also found it fun to dig up the magic of the Moon Empire. They liked to research the Moon language and claimed that the languages of all countries were inherited from the Moon language. Many words were simply variations of the Moon language. Now, Moon Whisperer's blessing sounded. It sounded really nice. List felt a little intoxicated, but he still used magic eyes to observe the silver coin. The magic lines on the silver coin were like strings of a musical instrument. Every time it vibrated, a moon whisper tone would ring out. Gradually, the magic in the air seemed to be affected by the blessing spell and began to gather like water waves. Eventually, the gathered magic began to wash the unconscious mage. After a long while, the blessing spell dissipated, and the luster of the silver coin gradually dimmed. List could not activate a new blessing spell even if he injected chi. At this time, the mage, who had been unconscious for more than a week, suddenly coughed softly. Cough, cough. She hadn't woken up yet, but her eyelids were twitching. List tidied up his frack abier, showed a proper aristocratic smile, and thought to himself, although the smoke mission used the mage who was originally in my hands as a mission reward, it was a bit sneaky. But it's still good to wake up Chrissy as soon as possible. There was no end to the dim world. She felt her body was full of fatigue, and her head seemed to have been hit by a sledgehammer. She was dizzy, unable to concentrate, weak, uncomfortable, sleepy, and dizzy. She wanted to escape, but there was nowhere to run. She could only keep wandering in the darkness, more tired and helpless each time. At this moment, an ethereal voice suddenly sounded in her ear. The voice was like a clear spring pouring over her body, instantly drenching her whole body, from top to bottom. Her drowsy consciousness also began to become clear. The dim world suddenly lit up with a light, marking the exit of the road. She ran hard, running toward the light at the exit, using all her strength. She no longer wanted to sink in the endless darkness. Finally, she ran to the exit, where the light was so bright that she couldn't help but close her eyes. But she still rushed over without hesitation. A new world unfolded in front of her. It was a simple wooden house. There were no superfluous decorations, but there was a handsome man with eyes like blue gems, looking at her with the most noble smile on his face. Their eyes met, as if their hearts were seen through by each other. Ah! She let out a sound, but her throat was extremely hoarse. "You're awake?" the handsome man asked in a slightly magnetic voice. Such an elegant temperament, such a gentle voice, and a gaze that could see through one's soul. It was like a dream, making her feel as if she had escaped from a nightmare and entered a wet dream. "I." Her voice was still very hoarse, and she couldn't express a complete meaning. In fact, she was still in a daze and hadn't completely woken up. "I'm glad that you're awake. Maybe you don't know that you've been unconscious for nearly a week after we rescued you from the sea." The handsome man smiled, as if the sun had swept away the haze. "You don't look like you've completely recovered. I'll have someone take care of you, and we'll talk when you're awake." Then, he turned and left. Soon, a few women dressed like commoners came in. They roughly helped her up, and someone wiped her face with a towel. As they wiped, they asked, "Miss Mage, do you feel better?" Someone also braided her hair, using enough strength to pull her hair out. She also said, "When you were rescued by the great and benevolent Sir Lord, your hair was already loose. I don't know how you tie your hair, so I can only comb a ponytail for now." Chapter 353. Chrissy Truth sobered up. Although she was still very weak, but with the help of the peasant woman, she had successfully sat on a stool and could answer List's questions. "So, is Chrissy Truth your name?" "Yes, Sir Baron." Chrissy nodded, and then said in a hoarse voice, "Thank you for rescuing me from the sea. Chrissy does not know how to repay your kindness." List said casually, "How about working for the Flower Town?" Chrissy didn't react. According to her usual routine, she should at least say a few polite words before talking about repayment. Of course, my life was saved by Sir Baron. Chrissy is very willing to work for you. But, I am a little worried that I will implicate you, Sir Baron. The solicitation seemed to be very successful. List asked, implicate me? Chrissy nodded, aren't you curious as to why I ended up in the sea? I am quite curious. You can tell me, I want to know. Since you are my savior, I should not hide anything from you. This matter is very serious and involves a lot of people. I hope that you will keep it to yourself, Lord Baron. It's best not to let a third person know. Is that so? Tell me, I will weigh the pros and cons. Chrissy took a deep breath. Her eyes were at a loss for a moment, and then she said slowly, I thought I was going to die. I was frozen in ice magic and drifted along the sea. Coral Island, Flower Town, and fortunately, I met Sir Baron, who gave me a second life. She paused. She seemed to be sorting out her thoughts. After a moment, she said, Coral Island is in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. It is remote. Perhaps by the time the news reaches here, it will already be too late. What news? List couldn't help but urge. Chrissy carefully looked at the room. After making sure that no one was eavesdropping, she leaned forward and said in a low but serious voice, Marquis Bull is going to assassinate the Grand Duke's dragon. What? List exclaimed, then lowered his voice. Chris, are you kidding me? I didn't, Lord Baron. I also hope that this is false news, but I personally participated in this matter, and this is all true. Crazy's expression became somewhat numb. The magicians of the Goat Gathering always thought that they were only researching about dragons. Only on the final day did they realize that Marquis Bull was using us to assassinate the Grand Duke's dragon. Goat Gathering? A gathering of mages, mainly to do some research on Iron Hoof Island. We're secretly receiving funding from Marquis Bull. List tried not to speculate too much and just continued to ask, you mean, the goat gathering that the Magic Goat family organized? Lord Baron, you also know about the Goat Congregation? I thought it was a secret magician organization. Yes, the Goat Congregation originated from the Magic Goat family more than 100 years ago. At that time, many magicians were attached to the Magic Goat family. After a disaster, the Goat Congregation was forced to move. They moved to Iron Hoof Island. They hid for decades, until one day, the leader of the Goat Gathering, a magician, established contact with the previous Marquis Bull. From then on, the magicians could stay on Iron Hoof Island with peace of mind, continue to do all kinds of research, and gradually grow stronger. Chris joined the Goat Congregation 14 years ago. At that time, she was only 10 years old and was still a magic apprentice. Until the year she was 17, she was promoted to a magician. She just turned 24 this year. I've always thought that the Goat Congregation was just an ordinary magician organization. They don't usually gather together, but occasionally they would exchange magic. The great magicians in the congregation would also assign some research topics for us young magicians. I was assigned a topic about whether souls can be stored. Ah, my soul storage tank. Did it fall into the sea? Only then did she remember that she still had a soul storage tank magic equipment. List was not embarrassed at all. Is it that copper kettle? It might have been taken away by my servant and stored in the castle's warehouse. Do you need it? It's a very magical magic equipment. It's the collection of the great magician Rashid Truth. After he assigned me a topic, he gave me the soul storage tank to study. But I hated him for betraying the Goat Congregation, so when I ran away, I took the soul storage tank with me. She said very cooperatively, now I don't plan to study souls anymore. Let it be in Lord Baron's warehouse. With a smile, List gestured, continue with your story. Yes. Chris glanced at List, and there was a slight blush on her face. We young magicians studied our topic seriously every day. But there was a magician flow truth. He was very active and always kept communicating with every magician. He found that when all of our topics were added up, they could actually be combined into a big topic: how to damage a dragon's soul. This kind of topic was not considered scary. Just like how many knights dreamed of becoming dragon slayers, magicians would often fantasize about how to kill or cripple a dragon. But the young magician Flo had an idea. He began to secretly investigate and immediately discovered a shocking conspiracy: Marquis Bull was plotting to slay a dragon. Of course, not only did he not tell on them, but he also actively cooperated because slaying a dragon was also one of his dreams. But when the research was almost done, the great magicians of the goat congregation suddenly began to capture the scattered magicians, silencing them. Flo told us to run for our lives. My teacher became the one who wanted to kill me. Just when I thought I was going to die, she cast the ice magic Eternal Ice on me and pushed me into the sea. My blessed pendant was given to me by my teacher. It can protect me from harm. Chris touched the silver coin pendant on her neck. Her eyes dimmed. I know. Teacher, Marquis Bull and the great magicians of the goat congregation went to assassinate the Grand Duke's dragon. I don't know if they succeeded. List frowned. Waves surged in his heart. The matter of slaying a dragon had reached his ears, catching him off guard. Chris, I want to know why Marquis Bull wants to slay a dragon. He has the bloodline of the Sapphire family. The original Marquis Bull was the favorite son of the first Grand Duke. As soon as he came of age, he was conferred the title of Earl Bull. After the founding of the nation, he was immediately enfeoffed with the Iron Hoof Island and promoted to Marquis Bull. The current Marquis Bull, Andy Sapphire, was said to have grown up in the palace. He was childhood playmates with the current Grand Duke and served as the Grand Duke's personal bodyguard. They could be said to be very close. The Bull family never changed their surname. They established the Bullhorn Academy to train servants for the palace. It could be said that the Bull family and the Sapphire family were tied together. They were bound together for good or bad. There was no reason for Marquis Bull to slay a dragon and destroy himself. Chris shook her head. It's probably because of longevity. I heard teacher say that the Magic Goat family has mastered the Undead Lich transformation technique. The goat congregation relied on this technique to get in touch with Marquis Bull. Lich. Lich again. Chapter 354. Chris, I need to go back and think about the news you brought. You have a good rest. There are farmers outside the door to take care of you. If you have any needs, you can tell them. List left the house in a hurry. First, he called his personal guard, Paris, over. Lord Baron, what can I do for you? The hair on Paris' forehead was wet. Obviously, she had been training hard before. She recently planned to learn Qi to see if she could take into account the power of the Black Dragon Gang and improve her strength. I saved a magician. You know that, right? Chris, truth, I have visited her. Her body is as fragile as an ordinary person. To be honest, I am very disappointed. If I also become a magician, I will probably be like her. Of course, it is different. The difference in figure and appearance is huge. List just had a thought in his mind, and then it was blown away like the wind. He was not in the mood to think about some messy things. She brought a piece of news that is hard to tell whether it is true or false. I need time to think about it, so during this period, I hope you can secretly monitor her movements. Hard to tell whether it is true or false. Lord Baron, do you need me to interrogate her? I am still very skilled in interrogation. Paris raised an eyebrow. No, she is going to stay in Flower Town and work for me. Maybe in the future, she will be the magician I worship. I am a little nervous about the news she brought, and I need time to digest it. Paris, when I think about it, I still need you to help me. After all, you are the person I trust. He put his hand on Paris' shoulder and squeezed it hard. Paris suddenly breathed a little faster and maintained a bright smile. "Lord Baron, you know I can't refuse." "Please, Paris." Liszt retracted his hand and turned away, leaving a straight back for Paris to stare at for a long time. Back in the castle's study, Liszt did not let anyone disturb him, but thought alone. Now in front of him was a dangerous situation. Everything was normal if it didn't happen, but if it did, it would definitely be a big earthquake in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. It was hard to tell what Chrissy Truth said. When she spoke, her tone was very sincere, and her logic was relatively self-consistent. A lot of the content could even be connected with the information that Liszt had, and there were no obvious loopholes. Moreover, there was no need for her to soak in the sea and be unconscious for more than a week before coming up with such a lie to deceive a country baron. If she's telling the truth. Perhaps the assassination of the Sapphire Dragon had already happened. The Magic Goat clan has been extinct for more than 100 years. Why are they still going through so much trouble? The former Marquis Cohen and Curtis Truth wanted to help Annette become the Dragon Domain Lord. Now the Goat Rally tricked the Bull Marquis into becoming a lich to assassinate the Sapphire Dragon. What enmity do these people have with the Sapphire Dragon? For the time being, he believed that what Chris said was true. In that case, there would only be two results: Marquis Bull would succeed in slaying the dragon, and Marquis Bull would fail. Failing to slay the dragon would be a good outcome. The Marquis Bull family would certainly be destroyed, and the Iron Hoof Island would turn into nothingness, engulfed by the anger of the Sapphire Grand Duke. But at least the country would still be stable, and the impact on Coral Island would not be great. Father might even have a chance to advance further because of the reduction of the Marquis title. The large island of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire could only accommodate 7 marquises. If there was one more marquis, they would have to make up the size of the fief with scattered small islands. This would be very troublesome and unfavorable for the administration. Therefore, the quickest way was to vacate the cage and replace the birds. It was believed that most of the counts would be happy to see the fall of the Marquis Bull family. But Andy Sapphire grew up in the palace. He must have come into contact with the Sapphire Dragon. He is also a close companion of the Grand Duke, and is hardly on guard against him. He has been preparing for so long. Including the previous Marquis Bull, he has been preparing for at least 30 years. Will he fail so easily? More than 30 years ago, the Goat Rally successfully connected with the previous Marquis Bull. For the Marquis Bull to shelter the remnants of the Magic Goat family who participated in the palace coup, it was clear that there must have been a secret deal, the Lich transformation technology. Therefore, it could be concluded that the Bull family had been plotting against the Sapphire Dragon since more than 30 years ago. Liszt's gaze wandered. He did not know what was so incredible about dragons, but from the residual magic power of the Fire Dragon, the smoke mission of the Smoke Dragon, and the spatial gem of the Invisible Dragon, he could barely catch a glimpse of the magic of dragons. The Sapphire Dragon was certainly not something that could be easily hunted by ordinary humans, not to mention the heavy protection of the Sapphire family. However, a marquis and an organization of wizards, 2 generations, and more than 30 years of preparation, how could it be taken lightly? If Marquis Bull succeeds and the Sapphire Dragon falls, then, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire may no longer exist. A country was established by a dragon, and would also be destroyed by a dragon. Without a dragon to suppress the fate of the country, the sacred swordsmen of the Sapphire family would not be able to guard the wealth that they had plundered and hoarded for more than 100 years. If Marquis Bull really succeeds in slaying the dragon, how should Coral Island face such a situation, and how should I face such a situation? There were too many possibilities for the answer to this question. There were opportunities, but there were also dangers. Liszt could not make accurate predictions, which made him feel very bad. He liked to develop step by step and did not like to be interrupted by accidents. Now that Flower Town and Black Horse Island were thriving, as long as he was given time to develop, riding a dragon was only a matter of time. I hate this feeling of not having any certainty about the future. Accustomed to the positive choices brought about by the smoke mission, List now felt very flustered. He wanted to find someone to talk to. Marcus? Marcus was just an elite Earth Knight who longed for nobility. He did not have the overall view. Gort? Gort was just a down-and-out Lord Knight. This news would probably scare him to death. Isaiah, Zambrata, Charles, Rick, and others were not suitable to discuss such news. Paris? She had faced a real dragon, but in essence, she was just a woman with an average IQ. Achi? The siren was as pure as a white paper. She might not even know what politics was. Butler Carter? It was undeniable that the person he trusted most in Flower Town was the butler Carter. He liked to hide in the study with Carter after a busy day, drink crescent wine, and discuss the castle, the town, and Black Horse Island. However, territorial matters could be found by Carter, but national affairs were too far away for Carter. After thinking about it, there was no one to talk and discuss. Chapter 355. The dragon-slaying incident was related to the fate of the family, but whether it happened or not, Coral Island was powerless to stop it. Therefore, List could not be too anxious. This was also related to his future. He had to think clearly about how to explain and how to deal with it in order to better discuss with the Count and negotiate a result that was beneficial to him. It was not wise to rashly throw out a question that he could not distinguish whether it was true or false. After drinking a cup of milk tea, he still found it difficult to calm down. The news brought by Crazy was really shocking. At this time, he suddenly remembered that the smoke mission should have been completed, so he called out the smoke mission, mission completed. Reward, Wizard Crazy Truth. Sure enough. The not-so-beautiful wizard who had just woken up was the reward of the smoke mission. Like the reward of the previous smoke mission, which was the thief Paris, this was a character reward. To be more precise, it was an opportunity for the reward to intersect with the corresponding character, and a favorable intersection. Whether he could grasp the mission reward or not, it was up to List to do it himself. Unfortunately, Paris is beautiful and has a good figure, while Crazy is so. He shook his head, feeling that he should not think about such a problem at this time. The smoke serpentines changed before his eyes. A new mission was quickly issued. The news brought by Crazy Truth has made you feel a deep sense of unease. This is a fear that stems from your weakness. As a great lord, please overcome the uneasiness in the depths of your heart and calm your mind. Reward, a melody from your memory. A great lord is right, but why is the reward a melody? Do you really want to train me into a piano king? List was not very satisfied with the reward. Of course. Playing and composing piano music had a very high bonus to his personal charm, attracting the attention of many women. But he was more willing to rely on his own efforts to become a powerful knight, become the focus of attention, and eventually realize his dream of riding a dragon. Piano music was meaningless. But the mission had been issued, and he had no reason to refuse. Mastering 2 more piano pieces would increase his communication skills in the future and sublimate his aristocratic heritage. Back to the mission content. How to overcome your innermost feelings and calm your mind. The best way was to play the piano. He went to the worm room and sat in front of the piano. Previously, the siren He listened to him playing the piano or singing accompaniment, but now he could only play for the sprite worms. Wow! There was also the elf Ella. It sat on the piano, yawning in boredom. Music was of no interest to it. In the past, when List was playing the piano, it would jump on the keyboard and dance. It only stopped after a few times of using the finger-flicking spirit art. His fingers gently stroked the piano keys. Taking a deep breath, List played the piano slowly. It was a new song he had learned recently, U'Reilly by the waterside. When he first heard Meopel play it in the Longtaro castle, he felt that it was very pleasant to listen to. Although he felt that it was slightly lacking in tempo changes, it was still a classic piano piece. Czerny Windmill, the great pianist, and Urieli, the Gorgon, looked at each other and turned into stone. He played slowly, which was different from Miopol's playing style. When he played at home, he would usually improvise, playing however he felt comfortable, without considering too many details. After playing it once, he played Die Elise and then switched to With You. The sound of the piano made Ella more and more sleepy. She simply fell on top of the piano and fell asleep. The more Liszt played, the more engrossed he became, and his mood became more and more carefree. He found that he really liked the piano. Every time he played, his mood would suddenly become cheerful. It seemed that there was no trouble that a piano piece could not solve. If there was, then he would play too. He didn't know when, but a misty smoke naturally appeared in front of him, forming serpentines. Mission completed. Reward, Canon in D major melody. His fingers had already tapped out a new sequence on the keyboard, and an extremely classic piano piece blossomed along with the keys. It was a rondo. The tune of one tone followed another from beginning to end, with a total of 8 chords running from beginning to end, until the last small knot, when the notes merged together. The song ended. Liszt quickly took out a pen and paper that he had prepared, dipped it in ink, and quickly scribbled down the melody. He played it a few times. While his inspiration was still there, he found the mistakes and dissonances, corrected them, and composed the complete version of Canon in D major. He wrote down the name, Canon in D major, Liszt, and included it in his piano piece. The piano piece soothed his mood, leaving him relaxed and rational. It made it easier for him to think about how to face the upcoming crisis. In fact, from beginning to end, I have neglected one point, that is, the Count and the Grand Duke are not the same. Of course, in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the Count has the Coral Island as a fief and has a high position of power. Once the Grand Duke has a problem, the Count will also be implicated. After putting away the piano piece and returning to the study, Liszt continued to ponder, but the first to bear the brunt is the Sapphire family, while the Tulip family, a small boat, is easy to turn around. No matter who annexes the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the Tulip family can choose their allegiance again. Of course. Changing allegiance was not a glorious thing, and the treatment would be correspondingly reduced. However, a wise man submits to circumstances. There was no need to be die-hard loyal to the Sapphire family, which was about to decline. As a sacred swordsman Sky Knight, the Count had a group of elite Earth Knight subordinates. His fighting strength was still quite considerable and hard to ignore. As long as the Tulip family was not pressured by an army, an island in the open sea like the Coral Island did not seem worthy of the continent's aristocrats sending a large number of orders of chivalry. If a dragon was sent, then there was nothing to say. If there was a country that used a dragon to deal with a count. Liszt felt that his family should eat and drink, and then sit and wait for death. Therefore, even if the sky falls, the tall ones of the Sapphire family will support it. I don't need to worry too much. I just need to sit and wait for the situation to change. The Count is roughly the same. At most, he can make preparations in advance. Whether the dragon slaying is successful or not, he can seize the initiative. That night, he slept soundly. Early the next morning, Liszt got up before dawn. He put on leather armor, equipped the red blood sword, mounted Black Dragon, and led the blizzard beast Dosen, ready to set off for Tulip Castle. He also informed Paris to bring Chris Truth with her to the Tulip Castle. On the way, Black Dragon knew the way to Longtaro Castle without him driving it. Therefore, he studied the new smoke mission on horseback. Chapter 356. The 6 new Earth Knights, after a period of running in, did not show much that Liszt was dissatisfied with. However, Liszt planned to wait for 3 months before considering the matter of following her. Now that the smoke mission was completed in advance, and the reward was a valuable item like Qi Manual, he had no reason not to complete it. When I come back, let these 6 people follow me. The sun had not yet risen in the east, and there was still some residual coolness in the early summer morning. List's thoughts flickered quickly. No one can predict whether the road ahead will be thorny or smooth. Does this mean that the smoke mission can't affect the threads of fate belonging to the Sapphire Dragon? Thinking about it, it's not right. The invisible dragon was affected, so it's impossible to say that the threads of fate of a Sapphire Dragon are thicker than the threads of fate of a Holy Dragon. Maybe it's because of the distance? He suddenly thought, so far, I have done a total of 60 smoke missions and completed 57. Only 3 missions have changed. Old Leathersmith's book collection, Thieves Spying on the Lord, and the establishment of the Fire Dragon Brick Factory. 59 of the missions are about Flower Town and Black Horse Island, and only 1 is about Dunico Hyacinth. In other words, the scope of the smoke mission that affects the threads of fate is within List's territory. The only one not in the territory was Dunico, a woman who had rolled in the sheets with him. It was undeniable that she should have been affected by this unhealthy relationship between a man and a woman. It has been 3 months since List gave up going to Red Crab Island to find her. Without any involvement, the threads of fate should have been broken long ago. So, the invisible dragon stopped near Flower Town, and was affected by the smoke mission or the smoke dragon's power of fate. But the Sapphire Dragon is located in the distant Blue Dragon Island, and the smoke mission can't affect it at all? It was just an inference, and there was no way to draw a real conclusion. After all, List was not even clear whether the smoke he saw was left by the smoke dragon. If it was he some kind of servant, or a dragon? Moreover, judging from the dragon's infection with dragon-type beasts, the dragon's bloodline did not possess the magical attributes of a dragon. The beasts infected by the fire dragon, water dragon, and metal dragon were only ordinary dragon-type beasts. Some of them were extraordinary, but that was all. It wouldn't become a fire horse just because it was infected by a fire dragon or a water horse just because it was infected by a water dragon. He wouldn't become a smoke horse just because he was infected by the smoke dragon. Similarly, if List was infected by the smoke dragon, he would at most become a draconian instead of what he was now. As for the servants, the white dragon was killed by the dragon, and its magic and soul combined to become a special way of existence in the state of ghosts. The black dragon was a voluntary sacrifice and was corroded by the magic of the dragon. List himself was definitely not a ghost, and he had never volunteered, so he should not be a servant. Then, did the smoke dragon die, and its power ran into my body? The key is, who can kill the smoke dragon that represents fate? According to some night novels and magic books, when the dragon is about to die, it will fly to an unknown location in the Dragon Valley. Therefore, it is unlikely that the smoke dragon died naturally, and then its power is attached to List's body, but it is also hard to say. The fire dragon died on Black Horse Island and has decayed into bones. In short, List thought about these speculations involved in divergent thinking and logical thinking more than once, but after all, there was too little evidence to prove anything. Along the way, he arrived at Tulip Castle at 8:00 in the morning. Levis was just about to go out and was surprised to see List coming. "My brother, why are you here today, and so early? When did you set off from Flower Town?" "I set off before dawn." "Where is father?" "Father is doing morning exercises in the flower garden behind the mountain." "Why are you here?" "It's a very serious matter, brother. Please find father and bring him back. I will wait for you in the study." List said seriously. "What's the matter? Tell me first." "It's more serious than you can guess." List didn't want to talk about it outside the study. He just urged Levis to hurry and call people. He took Chris into the Count's study first. Steward Lewis was sick, and now Tulip Castle was under the care of Silva, the deputy steward. He personally brought 2 cups of milk tea. Milk tea was the only thing List liked in Tulip Castle. Please sit down, Chris. Don't be nervous. My father is not a very strict person. Seeing that Chris was a little nervous, List couldn't help but comfort her. Chris nodded and sat down. Lord Baron, I am just a little worried that this will involve you and the Tulip family behind you. You saved me, I don't want you to be in trouble because of me. Coral Island is remote and the information is not smooth. As long as you don't reveal your identity, no one will recognize you, and no one will associate you with that matter. As for my father and my brother, they will be better able to deal with the danger if they know. Well, as long as it can help Lord Baron. Drink some milk tea, it seems that your spirit has not recovered very well. Thank you. It didn't take long for the Count's voice to come from outside the door. I would like to know why a son who hunted a 1-ton snake but only gave his father 5 kilograms of snake meat, would come looking for his father. List, who was drinking milk tea, couldn't help but cough. It was not that he was stingy, but he really couldn't bear to cough, cough. Before he finished coughing, the Count had already pushed open the door and walked into the study. He glanced at List and Chris next to him. Chris was not wearing a magic cloak and was just dressed like an ordinary person. After the Count looked at her, he went straight behind the desk. Speak, List, my dear son, what business do you have with me? Levis closed the door tightly and then asked, List, are you sure that this young lady whose name I have not yet asked, also wants to stay in the study? Her name is Chris Truth, she is a mage, and the news came from her. List ignored the Count's previous teasing about the 5 kilograms of snake meat and solemnly said, Brother, please make sure that no one is eavesdropping outside the door or outside the window. So careful? Being ordered around by List, Levis was a little unnatural, but he still checked carefully. The Count had already poured himself a glass of red wine and took a sip. Put away your mysteriousness and get straight to the point. What news did Her Excellency Chris bring? Marquis Bull may be preparing to assassinate the Grand Duke's sapphire dragon. No, he may have already assassinated it. It has been at least a week and a half, maybe even 2, since Chris brought the news. She was chased by a great mage at sea, cast eternal freeze, and sank into the sea, drifting to Coral Island. Chris and the others escaped from Iron Hoof Island by ship, but they didn't know where they sailed to. After being caught up by the great mage, she sank into the sea. Following the ocean current, she drifted to Flower Town's waters. 5 days had passed during this time. It could be roughly judged that Marquis Bull would make his move during this time. Subsequently, Chris was in a coma for 9 days. 9 days was enough for the dragon-slaying battle to come to an end. Chapter 357. Assassinating a dragon was indeed a stupid decision. However, to assassinate a dragon after careful preparation was enough to make one tremble in fear. Father, brother, I can't guarantee that this information is true. I can only relay the information Chris brought to you for you to analyze. The dragon assassination plan originated about 30 years ago. The remaining members of the Magic Goat family hid in the Goat Gathering, a magician organization. They probably used the Lich transformation technology to contact the previous Marquis Bull. Then, List told him the news that Chris had brought, as well as his own conclusions. After that, Levis still did not believe it. This is ridiculous. Assassinating the Sapphire Grand Duke's dragon is definitely not something a normal person can think of. Dragons are the pinnacle of power in the world. Even if it's a sub-dragon or a dragon beast, it's not something that can be easily killed. His words made some sense. Just like the immeasurable gap between the Sky Knight and the Dragon Knight, there was also an immeasurable gap between World of Warcraft and dragons. The Sky Knight and Great Magicians were very strong. They could hunt down intermediate World of Warcraft, and even advanced World of Warcraft. However, there were 3 levels between Advanced World of Warcraft and Dragons: Super Warcraft, Advanced World of Warcraft, and Super World of Warcraft. It was hard to imagine that someone could cross so many levels to kill a dragon that could control the fate of a country. So, Marquis Bull's dragon assassination plan was like a cold joke. The Count did not laugh. He looked at Chris. "You are a magician of the goat gathering. Then, do you know a magician named Weber Truth? He is one of the leading magicians of the goat gathering. We call him Teacher Weber. He is responsible for guiding new members." "What about Von Truth? The other leading archmage?" "He and my teacher, Olivia Truth, were in charge of hunting down the young sorcerer who knew the secret." Chris answered with some pain in her voice. The Count nodded and said to List, "Send Miss Chris to rest. We will continue talking when she comes back." "Yes, father." He waited for List to send Chris out. Levis said impatiently, "Father, you don't think List's news is true, do you?" "I don't believe Chris's words from beginning to end." "Don't be impatient, Levis." The Count took a sip of wine and said with a serious face, "I've met Wilbur Truth and Warrant Truth once. They're the two great sorcerers worshipped by Marquis Bull. As for the Goat Congregation, I've heard of this organization of sorcerers. It originated from the extinct goat family. Is that true? Maybe Chris just borrowed the name of the goat gathering and plotting. Magicians love to do that. What is there in the Coral Island that is worth a wizard's planning? Who would soak themselves in the sea and be unconscious for 9 days just to get close to a baron? Or did you use List to get close to me?" As the Count spoke, his face regained its calm. "There's an 80 to 90% chance that it's true. I know Marquis Bull. He will definitely go crazy for immortality. Father, do you think it's true? Will Marquis Bull really assassinate a Grand Duke's dragon? Is there a problem? It's just assassinating a dragon. If everyone didn't have the courage, how could there be a heroic title like Dragon Slayer in the world? How could a Dragon Slayer and a Grand Duke assassinate be the same? A Dragon Slayer kills an evil dragon, that's why he's a hero. On the other hand, murdering a Grand Duke's dragon is a heinous act. If he succeeds, who cares if he kills a good dragon or an evil one? Levis, I hope you can calm down. As the heir to Coral Island, you're not as steady as your brother List. I just don't quite believe this fact. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. You have to learn to distinguish between priorities." The Count said. List solemnly brought this news. "He can't distinguish whether it's true or not, and neither can I. But this doesn't prevent us from discussing how it will affect the family and Coral Island if it's true." Levis wanted to say something, but gave up. "Yes, father. Tell me your opinion. What impact will Marquis Bull's killing of the Sapphire Dragon have? It will be a disaster. Without the Sapphire Dragon, our country will not be able to continue to exist. The Sapphire family will be destroyed, and the small families attached to the Sapphire family will also be destroyed." The more Levis thought about it, the more nervous he became. "Father, if it's true, then we must be prepared. You still haven't considered the issue comprehensively enough. There are 3 outcomes for Marquis Bull to assassinate a dragon: failure, success, and compromise. Each outcome will bring about a different situation that needs to be dealt with. How should Coral Island deal with such a situation?" Levis sank into contemplation. He was just an unmarried young man in his 20s. On the other side, List, who had already handed Chrissy over to Paris, quickly returned to the study, and found a place to sit down. The Count asked, "Has it been arranged?" "I handed it over to my guard, Paris." "Father, please rest assured, Paris is worthy of my trust, there will be no mistakes." List knew what the Count wanted to ask. The Count seemed to have thought of something and said somewhat strangely, "Although I don't think that inheriting your mother's appearance is an advantage for a male aristocrat, but in many cases, it does have certain advantages. However, young people had better learn to restrain themselves." List did not understand what the Count was talking about and just nodded. The Count changed the subject, but you can't restrain yourself too much, 5 kilograms of snake meat is too little. Lord Father, the meat of a mid-level sea monster is just a taste for you, but it is of great help to me. It is related to my future and can reach even greater heights. In fact, I brought a gift for you, my brother, and Litten. Each of you will get a piece of leather armor made from the six-headed sea serpent king. List said calmly. He had to admit that 5 kilograms of snake meat was indeed not generous enough, but hunting the six-headed Hydra king took a lot of effort, and snake meat was an excellent ingredient for taking potions. He really did not want to share it with others. Therefore, he simply used the snakeskin armor as compensation. Hearing that there was a snakeskin armor and that even Litten had a share, the Count expressed satisfaction. Learning to restrain your desires and know how to make choices is a good progress. As a father, I can understand your eagerness to improve your strength. You wasted too much time when you were young. It's good that you can understand. Born in the tulip family, my talent is the worst, which really makes me very distressed. But the glory of the night favors you more. Levis interjected. Chapter 358. The pressure brought by the dragon assassination was quickly resolved by the witty banter between the father and son. Levis was no longer nervous, and List appeared more relaxed. The Count was even in the mood to pour a glass of crescent wine for each of his 2 sons. Then, the three analyzed the impact of the dragon assassination from a god's perspective. The analysis and reasoning were very simple. Assuming that the dragon assassination was true and had already happened, then there were 3 outcomes: the sapphire dragon was killed by Marquis Bull, the country collapsed, and Coral Island had to find a way out, the rebellion of Marquis Bull was suppressed, the sapphire dragon was safe and sound, and Coral Island only had to wait for the Grand Duke's order. There was also a compromise: the assassination of Marquis Bull failed, but the sapphire dragon was also injured. In this case, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire would not be destroyed so quickly. However, the undercurrents of various forces inside and outside were certain, and Coral Island was among them. What should they do? This was a headache. Now, they discussed each situation separately. If the dragon is killed, we have to abandon the Sapphire family without hesitation. Perhaps siding with Marquis Bull is the right choice, if he can become a lich. Levis expressed his opinion regarding the first situation. As for humans siding with a lich, this was not important. The Count shook his head. List, what do you think? I am not optimistic about Marquis Bull becoming a lich. Longevity without power is just courting death. Those kings and grand dukes would certainly not mind riding a dragon to capture him and treat him as an excellent experimental subject. If he really becomes a lich, he will definitely hide and struggle at death's door. From the moment Marquis Bull staked everything on the assassination of the dragon, he had already been eliminated from the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. List continued, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire will inevitably fall apart. The question is who will take over this archipelago, the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, or the Eagle Kingdom, or both sides will have their own misgivings. This place will become a chaotic place. Without the protection of the dragon, the number of pirates will definitely increase wildly. The dragon represented the pinnacle of power and order. Without the dragon, the expansion of people's hearts would probably be far beyond imagination. Levis asked, you mean we should choose a country to rely on? Yes, I'm inclined to choose the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. After all, it's our sovereign kingdom. Those marquises will be more welcomed. We're just a count's clan. If we join them, we might even be demoted to a viscount. Even if you want to maintain your status as an earl, you have to pay a lot of wealth. We need to maintain the island, and the kingdom won't go overboard. We might have to pay 10 to 20% of the taxes as protection fees, but it's worth it overall. After all, we've resolved a crisis, and it's our fault for losing the dragon's protection. The Count nodded. Your analysis is reasonable, but you have overlooked one thing. Even if they lose the Sapphire Dragon, the Sapphire family still has a huge amount of wealth. They can use this wealth to trade with any country and obtain asylum. In the future, the Sapphire family might become a marquee family of some country. He looked at his two sons. As for us, we can continue to follow the Archduke. Support in times of difficulty often means loyalty. A loyal noble will be appreciated by the majority of the lords. At that time, it will be time to choose a better target to serve. Levis and Liszt wanted to change sides as soon as possible. The Count wanted to put on a facade first, and then wait for the right price. We need to unite. If the nobles of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire are scattered like sand, they will be easily taken advantage of. Liszt added, Red Crab Island is the best partner, and Golden Island can also be united. We are the nobles of the island. We may be poor, but we are needed to govern the island. This discussion lasted for a whole day. At night, the basic framework was reached. On the surface, they would pretend to know nothing, but in secret, they would be ready to send troops, protect themselves, or flee at any time. The Count sent people to closely inquire about the news. It stood to reason that the news was already on the way, and they would soon know how to deal with it. After going back, break in your night squad as soon as possible. This is a crisis, but also an opportunity. Since you have chosen to fight for glory, the battlefield is the most appropriate way. The Count said earnestly, I ignored you before, but now I hope that we, father and son, can fight side by side. Liszt solemnly saluted, I am always looking forward to it. The Count did not know what to say next. He just patted Liszt on the shoulder, if your mother could see you today, she would be proud of you. Thank you. Go and have a good rest. There is nothing to be nervous about. Aristocrats have their way of survival. There will not be too many twists and turns because of the life and death of a dragon. The strength we have grasped is the foundation of this world. Hold the spear in your hand and be fearless of any difficulties. I will remember your teachings. From Tulip Castle, he returned to the Flower Town. Although Liszt put aside the matter of the dragon slaying for the time being, but he did not relax. Despite his weak strength, he still had to be ready to deal with the crisis. Therefore, he immediately notified the 6 Earth Knights, I hope to complete the night squad's run-in as soon as possible. As for the 6 of you, you can start making your own choices. We are willing to charge for Sir. Chapter 359. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3 hours. When Liszt opened all the night novels on the bookshelf, he found that none of them were like the Vulture Knight Stefanland's expedition. The golden paper hidden in the cover recorded the Magic Eye secret technique. How could this be? Is the Aura Decay not hidden in the night novel? If not, how did it get into my hands? He thought hard but could not come up with an answer. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. The locals of Flower Town certainly do not know any Qi secret techniques. Even the Tulip family does not have Qi secret techniques. The purchased serfs obviously do not know Qi secret techniques. They are just a group of commoners. But Chrissy is not a local, she may know. His follower, Charles Trapp, was not a local. But if he really knew Qi's secret techniques, then he would not be in such a bad situation. Paris was also not a local. It was just that she had not cultivated Qi before, so she should not have mastered Qi's secret techniques. Otherwise, with the relationship between Liszt and Paris, she should have given it to him with both hands. Therefore, he went directly to Chrissy's house. Chrissy was arranged to live next to Paris in the aristocratic residential area. How is your rest? Liszt asked gently. It's a lot better. Thank you, Sir Baron, for your concern. Chrissy put on her magic cloak and was reading a magic book. The book was lent to her by List. He had signed a contract with Chrissy, officially employing her as his magic consultant. Originally, List intended to pay her. But Chrissy refused and decided to work for List for free in return for saving her life. Of course, List had to pay for her clothing, food, and transportation. She also had to have the castle support her magic books, experimental materials, and so on. This situation made List very confused. Did he get a free wizard, or did the other party get a free patron? Fortunately, Crazy Truth was quite talented. She became a magician at the age of 17 and had hopes of becoming a great magician in the future. He was proficient in water, fire, and wind magic, and had also dabbled in earth and lightning magic. Because she had been engaged in theoretical research for a long time, she was not very proficient in making magic equipment, but she was very skilled in making magic potions. She relied on making magic potions to maintain her income at the goat gathering. I should have let you rest for a few more days. After all, your body hasn't recovered yet. But you know, the situation I'm facing right now is a little tense. I understand, Lord Baron. Just let me know if you need anything. Flower Town is currently working with 2 mages, Elksun and Glanny. Glanny is responsible for making magic equipment for me and occasionally comes over. Elksun makes potions for me and I am going to hand over his work to you. List said. He has planned to let Elksun concentrate on collecting magic books and obtain magic through various channels, so that he no longer has to stay in Flower Town to make potions. He believed that trading in second-hand books and magic was enough for him to make a fortune. Chris nodded. I'm good at making potions, no problem. By the way, do you know what an auxiliary potion is? List thought of his auxiliary potion, Black Nightshade. The seedlings have not yet grown, so it has not been studied yet. I'm sorry, Lord Baron, I have not heard about this potion. It doesn't matter. It's just that someone told me that my Black Nightshade has mutated and become an auxiliary potion. It hasn't grown yet. When it matures, I hope you can help me figure out what the role of the auxiliary potion is. Okay. The town currently has Black Tulip, fast-growing magic thorns, ordinary flame mushroom, and the auxiliary potion Black Nightshade. In winter, we can also grow snow flame mushroom. There are 5 potions in total. Your job is not easy. Have you considered choosing some children from the town to be your magic apprentices? If I have a need, I will choose magic apprentices. Lord Baron, the inheritance of the truth requires a lot of energy to complete it. I may not be able to do it now. I haven't recovered from the shock of the last magic apprentice's death. She was killed in an explosion during an experiment. It seemed that being a magic apprentice was indeed a high-risk profession. He decided not to beat around the bush. Chris, you work at the goat gathering. Have you ever come into contact with any knight's combat skills? Combat skills? Chris thought carefully, then shook her head. No, I rarely come into contact with a knight. The closest I came was probably being chased by a knight. You really didn't? No. List suppressed his disappointment and continued to smile. Then, you know 6 kinds of water magic. Can you tell me how to cast the Spring of Water spell? I have always been very interested in magic. He was actually not interested. But Achi was very interested. She had learned Water Arrow Volley, Water Will Wall, Water Bullet, and Water Whirlpool. She had begun to study the water wave shield that only great magicians could master. However, she was not proficient enough in magic arrays and magic runes, so her progress in learning the water wave shield was slow. One more Spring of Water spell could increase Achi's foundation. In fact, List was also going to let Achi write down all the problems she encountered in learning magic and give them to Chris to solve through him. It was equivalent to finding a teacher for Achi. Sir Baron, you don't have to be so polite. You are my savior. If you need anything, just tell me. I will sort out the spring of water spell and give it to you. Well, I may also ask you for some knowledge related to water magic later. I am willing to answer your questions. If you have any needs in life, just tell me. I will try my best to meet them. Take Flower Town as your home and start a new life here. Chris's eyes were bright. Yes, Sir Baron. Back in the study, List was still thinking about where he should get the Chi's secret skill. It stood to reason that if he did not look for it, the Chi's secret skill might soon appear on its own. However, he was used to cooperating with smoke missions and taking the initiative to get his reward. He clearly knew that the Chi's secret skill was right beside him, but he could not get it. This feeling was quite uncomfortable. Distressed, he drank a cup of milk tea and calmed his mind. He casually opened a magic book on the table. The title of the book was Cavendish's Air Capture Record. This was the research notes of a great wizard called Cavendish Truth. The book recorded Cavendish's research on air. He believed that the reason why magic had different properties was due to its combination with the substances in the air. The book was valuable, not because of the experimental content. In fact, the experimental content was empty and boring, and there were no research results. It was because Cavendish believed that air was only composed of fine dust and free magic. He did not even think of the essential elements of breathing. The real value was that Cavendish had recorded the whole process of preparing the wizard tower, including the materials needed, the price of the materials, the manufacturing of the experimental equipment, the efficiency of potion production, and so on. This gave List a clear reference for the cost of a wizard's experiment, which could reduce the possibility of being cheated by unscrupulous wizards in the future. Of course. Chapter 360. To be honest, List considered where the Chi's secret technique might be hidden in the book, the cover and the pages. Although the thick bast paper was thick, it was still difficult to hide another piece of paper that recorded the Chi's secret technique. Moreover, a book page that hid another piece of paper was obviously different from the other pages and would be easily discovered. There was no point in hiding it like this. Therefore, he could only search in the cover. He cut open the books one by one. When he was halfway through, there was still no Chi's secret technique. However, he was not discouraged. The castle's magic book collection was only 2/3 full. The remaining 1/3 was in the Seaview Villa and the other in Chrissy's house. As the saying goes, opportunities are for the prepared. When he cut open the cover of a magic book tucked in the corner of the bookshelf, a silver inner page was exposed from the scratch of the cover. Soon, he pulled out the whole page. The silver paper was densely covered with serpentines, and on the back was a diagram of the human body's Chi circulation. Do families with Chi's secret techniques like to preserve their family's Chi's secret techniques in this way? List stroked the silver paper and judged that it was made of silver. But obviously, it is a level lower than the Vulture Knight Stefanland's gold paper. He had obtained the Chi's secret technique, but he did not check it immediately. Instead, he flipped through the magic book. The book was titled, Searching for the Pinch Beetle King of World of Warcraft. He vaguely remembered reading it. The content was not attractive, or rather, it was more professional. It recorded the morphological characteristics of several pinch beetles, but in the end, the book did not record any beetle in World of Warcraft. So, this magic book has nothing to do with Vulture Knight Stefanland's expedition, ? Two different books, one was a night novel and the other was a magic book, yet they concealed Chi's secret skills in the same way. Moreover, both ended up in the Flower Town. List could not guess what the driving force behind this was. For example, what caused the Chi's secret technique to leak, or why the Chi's secret technique was placed in the book, and then how it ended up on Coral Island after traveling thousands of miles. There was no way to know. He could only treat it as luck. He shifted his gaze to the silver paper. At the top was a line of relatively large serpentines, Aura Attenuation Secret Technique, Stephanie Vulture. Liszt stared at the title to make sure he wasn't mistaken. The author of the book was Stephanie Vulture, a sky knight who lived in the Blast Castle Kingdom and wrote a World of Warcraft Vulture. The secret technique of magic I came from Stephanie. From the gem space, he took out the golden paper that recorded the magic eye. Comparing the two. The names were exactly the same, and even the craftsmanship of the paper and the serpentine carvings were surprisingly the same. In other words, these two secret techniques originated from Stephanie. He might not have created them, but he must have obtained them. He's definitely not an ordinary sky knight. The Count was a sky knight, a sacred swordsman-level sky knight, but the Count didn't have a single chi secret technique. The Taro family definitely had a chi secret technique, but as a grandson, Liszt didn't know what it was. Every aristocratic family kept their family's chi secret technique strictly confidential. It was a treasure that could be passed down from generation to generation, just like the elves. It was very valuable. It was basically certain that it was passed down to males and not females. What was the reason that made Stephanie leak the chi secret technique in a covert way? Liszt shook his head and decided not to look into it. He began to study the aura attenuation. The content was very complicated, and the chi operation method was very tricky and strange, but it was slightly less difficult than the magic eye. Its effect was just like its name. It was used to weaken one's own aura. In other words, it would greatly weaken the do chi that one was constantly releasing. It had two uses. One was to act like a pig to eat a tiger, so that others would not be able to accurately judge one's do chi level. The other was to reduce the consumption of do chi. The relationship between a knight's body and chi was like that of a bucket and water. However, it was not a perfect bucket, but a bucket that was constantly leaking. Therefore, a knight had to persist in training and replenish nutrition. Otherwise, the chi refined by the body could not keep up with the chi lost, and the total amount of chi would continue to be lost. It was even more so when taking potions. The magic would constantly collide with the body, breaking the shackles and turning the body into a sieve. Only by constantly replenishing new potions and absorbing more nutrition could one continuously refine chi, maintain the total amount of chi, and continue to practice chi. The value of the aura attenuation lay in its ability to reduce the loss of chi through the coordination of chi operation, which indirectly saved the consumption of resources and improved the foundation of cultivation. In other words, in the past, Liszt ate a large piece of World of Warcraft meat every day to maintain the loss of chi in his body. Now, he only needed to eat a small piece of World of Warcraft meat. In the past, when taking potions, there would always be a large amount of magic dissipating. With the help of the aura attenuation, he could greatly save potions and improve the efficiency. At the end of the introduction, there was a record of the effect of Stephanie's chi secret technique. Aura attenuation can slow down the loss of chi in the body, but the effect will weaken as the chi increases. Elite Earth Knight can slow down the loss of chi by about 3/4, Normal Sky Knight can slow down the loss of chi by 2/3, Sword Saint Sky Knight can slow down the loss of chi by half, Maxed Sky Knight can slow down the loss of chi by 2/5, Dragon Knight Stage Unknown. At the same time, because of the slowing down of chi, it will confuse other knights' judgment of their own strength. A Sky Knight can appear as an Earth Knight. Stephanie Vulture. He could be sure that when he wrote this chi secret technique, he was a maxed Sky Knight. The higher the strength, the less it slows down. At the Elite Earth Knight stage, it can slow down the loss of chi by 3/4. This effect is truly amazing. Liszt was very satisfied with the effect of the aura attenuation. Saving resources was important, but the effect of disguising strength was even better. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was a necessary skill for transmigrators. Without the aura attenuation, he could pretend to be an ordinary Earth Knight in front of the Count, but in front of Marquis Merlin, he would be exposed. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.